Welcome to the San Carlos City Council meeting for Monday, February 22nd. Pardon? Okay. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You will again note the absence of one of our colleagues, Matt Grocott, who is recovering from cancer treatment. But he is, the word is he's doing well. He's back home. We wish Matt well, and we look forward to seeing him soon. Item 3 is changes to the order of the agenda. I know of one change. I don't know if you want to address that, Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull item 8D, the Stormwater Master Plan, off of tonight's agenda. We noticed in reviewing the packet today that there were a few missing attachments to that report that we feel would be important for the council and the public to consider. There's no time urgency with the item, so we'll reschedule that for a future agenda.
Great, thank you. I note that I have one speaker card for item 8D from Mr. Boris, so I would invite him to speak under public comment, general public comment in just a couple minutes. Are there any other changes to the order of the agenda? Hearing none. I don't see a report from closed session. Do we need to have a report from closed session? No, there's no. Well, I'll just make an announcement then that tonight, prior to the council meeting, we had the opportunity to interview 3 very qualified candidates for appointment to the San Carlos Economic Development Advisory Commission. Unfortunately, we could only appoint 2 of those candidates, and so we made a decision this evening to appoint Don Mancini and Sarah McDowell to serve on the Economic Development Advisory Commission. We want to thank all of our applicants for their interest in serving the city, and congratulations to Don and Sarah. Now we'll move on to item 4, council communications and announcements, and we will start with Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have none tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I get into my comments, I want to say congratulations to Don and to Sarah. You guys did a fantastic job. My only comment to you, Don, is what took you so long? Anyway, congratulations and welcome. You're going to do a great job, both of you. I just have 3 things, 3 quick things. Not a lot of council-related meetings the last couple of weeks. But I finally got an opportunity, because I had a break in my schedule lightened up. I got a chance to do a ride-along with Sergeant Steve Pettit from the San Carlos Police Division of the Sheriff's Department. And I've always respected law enforcement and always appreciated what they do, but you don't really get a feeling as to what they do on a daily basis until you actually sit in a car with them and drive around. I was just amazed, totally amazed. It just raised my level of respect to really a new level. They really have to be versatile. You know, they talk to a lot of people. They encounter a lot of situations. I have to tell you, I did see a seamier part of town that I didn't know existed. It's sort of between the back of some buildings and the railroad tracks. But you know, Sergeant Pettit is just fearless, just goes back there. But the way he deals with people and talks to them he doesn't talk down to them, he doesn't insult them, he's not aggressive, he's just, he has a great demeanor, a lot of mutual respect. This guy's lived in town for 39 years. A lot of people don't know that most of our police force here, or our sheriff's officers, were from the former San Carlos Police Department. So a lot of them live in the community. As we drove around, he said, this guy lives there and that guy lives there. So it was a great experience. I think it was probably just, 2.5 hours. We went to an emergency call, and we finished the night with an incident at the youth center where they smelled gas. Somebody smelled gas, and they had to clear the building, so the fire department came. So that was kind of a bonus to meet some of our firefighters too, who also, some of which also happen to live in town. It was just a great experience, and I just wanted to say thanks to Sergeant Pettit and the rest of the San Carlos Sheriff's deputies for the work that they do for us every day. Second thing I went to was a chamber mixer at the Floor store on El Camino Real a couple weeks ago, and that building used to be the San Carlos Bowl, where I played a lot of games as a kid. I wasn't very good, but it was a lot of fun. It's probably the first time I'd been in that building since I was 16 or so. But it's a great store. It's a great addition to town. And I was very impressed with the variety of materials they have. I encourage everybody, if you're thinking about redoing your floors or your walls or whatever, home improvement, I was amazed at the variety they had. And they had great pizza, too. So, and the last thing, we don't normally talk about this, but we had our council annual strategic planning meeting last Wednesday. It used to be a semi-annual meeting. Now it's an annual meeting, and we had some good facilitators in there. This is a process where we sit down and we talk about, different ideas that we have for the future. It's sort of high-level stuff, but a lot of things that we talk about as a council come as a result of letters and emails and phone calls that we get from you, our fellow residents. City manager said, "Why is traffic so important?" And Bob Griselli said, "Because we get emails on it. People ask about it." So it does matter what people say to us. I encourage everybody, if you have an issue, we have Inform San Carlos, which we started a year ago. It's really a cool interactive tool. If you got an issue, you go on, you say, "I have an issue on my street." It gets recorded, it gets responded to. The outreach that this city's done has just been nothing short of amazing in the last 10 years or so. So I noticed we only had about 2 members of the public there. Thank you, David, for coming. But those meetings are open to the public. They're noticed in advance. And if you ever want to spend part of a morning finding out how, what the vision is of the city, what our goals and objectives are, and how we work together, it's almost more fun than these, but not quite.
Almost.
But that's all I have for now.
All right. Thanks, Ron.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one brief comment. Ron, when you said that you were riding with Sergeant Pettit, and since he's the head of our motorcycle division, I was immediately going to say, did you ride in back or did he let you steer? But apparently you were in a car?
We were in a car.
Oh, too bad. Well.
I was going to ask if you made any arrests, but Bob, you got anything for us this evening?
I can't follow much of what's been said already, so no, I don't, Mr. Mayor.
I also wanted to echo Ron. I thought that the strategic planning session was really good, and I thought staff did a great job, particularly Jeff, putting that together. I thought it was a really productive conversation, and so much so that we've asked for more, so we have an upcoming meeting. And then I wanted to do a little show and tell. Crystal, do you have some slides for me? So as my term, in the big seat, being mayor of the city, what I wanted to do, one of the things I wanted to do was to spend some time every month recognizing some local organizations. I have the privilege of serving on the San Mateo County Library Board. I have 2 young children that spend a lot of time at the library, and the library means a lot to me. And I think we have a great local organization called the Friends of the Library that does a lot to support our library, to support learning in our community. And the main mechanism that they do that is through fundraising through book sales. And yesterday they had their monthly book sale upstairs. And so my daughter and I took the opportunity to go. So let's see. Do I need to turn this on? What did you say?
Left side.
On. There we go. Monthly book sale. So the 3rd Sunday of each month from 1 to 4 upstairs at the library. So the first thing we did is we boxed up a bunch of our old books. And so if you're going to do some spring cleaning this year, if you have books that are sitting on your shelf that you're not reading, I highly recommend you donate them. You can drive them down underneath the parking lot, underneath the library. There's this area that says Friends of the Library. You can drop off books there 24 hours a day. You can see they're all stacked up there, and then they get sorted. And where they go is up to essentially this giant bookstore on the 2nd floor of the library. They have all kinds of books. They have lots of kids' books. My daughter is really into Batman these days. And we ended up getting about a dozen books. I think it cost us $4.50 for like 12 books. And I had an opportunity to visit with a bunch of the volunteers that participate and learn a little bit more. In 2015 alone, they raised $95,000 through book sales. And some of that they give to support programs or to sponsor community events. They saved up a bunch of money over the years and donated $200,000 to support the recent library renovation. So they're a tremendous asset to the community. They sell books with their monthly book sale. They also have a library bookshop that's open every day that the library is open, that you can purchase books. And as I said, you can donate books in the library parking garage 24 hours a day. For books that they're not able to sell, they donate them to needy causes. They donate them to St. Vincent de Paul. They would donate them to local schools. They even get international requests. They said they donated a whole bunch of books to a school in Africa. So if you've got extra books, they're going to go to a good place, and you can drop them off and walk out with a whole bunch of summer reading for a very small amount of money. So to support them, I was happy to donate my mayor's salary this month. And for those of you who are interested in getting involved, you can become a member. I think the annual dues are $25. There's a website up there, scfol.org. And that is all that I have for this evening. So with that, we will move on to item 5, which is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. I have one speaker card tonight. As I mentioned, I wanted to invite Mr. Louis Boris up, who was going to speak under item 8D, which has been pulled from the agenda. So Mr. Boris, please come on up. Oh.
No, but it'd be good if I had 2 hands. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I'm reading my presentation at this time due to the time allotted for public comments. My name is Louis Boris, and our family has lived in San Carlos for 57 years. My plea for the Council and Public Works is to give priority to the master storm drain plan, including the 14, 15, and 1600 blocks of El Camino Real. You have seen the flooding pictures and newspaper articles from 2005 to 2015 that I submitted. The information is only a small view of the problems we have had. On July 23, 2004, I gave Parviz Malteri a large 64 binder of pictures and newspaper articles from 1971 to 2004, with flooding pictures and newspaper articles also. I have worked with Parviz, Public Works, Don Gilbert, Robert Weeds, Public Works, Keith Hanna, Public Works, Frank Amoroso, Sewer Maintenance Supervisor, Vice Mayor Bob Griselli, and most recently, Wee Nugent, Public Works, and Jay Walters, Public Works. I've had many meetings with these men from 1971 to 2004 with no priority given to our project. In July 2012, I had a meeting with Mr. Walters and asked him to return the information that I had supplied to Parviz. Mr. Williams got back to me stating he checked all departments and informed me that the binder could not be located. I apologize to council for the void of information from 1971 to 2004. I've never stopped trying to get this project put on the Council and Public Works priority list. I think Vice Mayor Bob Griselli can testify to this, and the Council will give this hearing serious consideration. On May 20th, 47 years ago, we purchased a property located at the corner of El Camino Real and Central, address 1600 and 1608. Our property has only 2 working catch basins for 4 blocks from White Oaks Avenue south to Finger Avenue, accepting some water from the Alameda, from Laurel Street, and 4 blocks of El Camino water runoff. 1400 blocks has Walgreens and Trader Joe's with flooding parking lots and buildings that are set back 50 feet or so off of El Camino. 1500 block has a motel and Olson Nolte Saddle Shop with 1 insufficient undersized catch basin which ties into our basin at our location at Central. The main problem is the Aegis storm drainage system undersized pipes, and lack of catch basins collecting water, especially at high tides when most flooding occurs. My building has flooded many, many times during these years, causing major damage to structure, flooring, mud cleanup, sheetrock, studs and walls, also reduced and loss of rent, and tenants not renewing leases. After the last flood, we were vacant for over a year. We finally rented the space for storage, not retail. In closing, needless to say, the expenses I have incurred have cost me more than I paid for the building in 1969. I know money has always been a problem for large projects, but in the newspaper articles I submitted, including in 1986, council voted to fix flooding for southern El Camino, our area, and Britain Underpass, a $32 million project. Parvis assured me that our project would be considered at that time. It was not included in the final project. In 1987, council voted to enforce flood assessments of $2.5 million. In 2009, council voted an appropriation to raise $380,000 annually to replace old storm drains. Small storm drains work has been done, but our project has never been a priority due to the lack of money. I hope this council will vote to make the 14, 15, and 1600 block of El Camino's first priority. I've worked over 45 years to get some relief for this and peace of mind. It has been a mental challenge to wake up at night hearing the downpour and having to get up out of bed and go down to the property to make sure the drain grates are not covered with debris and the sandbags are in place. Thank you for the time allowing me to make my presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. I neglected to mention item 4B, which is staff comments on city administrative business. Do we have any comments this evening?
No, I didn't have any comments this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, approval of the consent calendar. Consent items are considered routine in nature and will be enacted in a single motion. Any member of the public or member of the council can ask that an item be removed. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes. Now we'll move on to item 7A, a public hearing on consideration of introducing an ordinance amending several chapters of the San Carlos zoning ordinance to define formula businesses and establish a permit process for formula business uses in the downtown core area. Mr. Savay, I have the clicker here if you need it.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I'd like to make just a couple of introductions quickly before I begin the presentation. Lisa Porras, our principal planner, is here this evening, as is Nell Sealander, our economic development coordinator, and I may call upon them to help answer questions as they arise. I'm in this presentation, I'm going to get the clicker first. There we go. I'd like to talk a little bit about the background research, the Community Outreach Planning Commission consideration, and all the other things that led to the proposed ordinance before you this evening. The City Council passed an urgency ordinance back in late November requiring all new formula businesses to get a conditional use permit. The council extended the urgency ordinance 120 days, and that would allow us the time to put this ordinance together, to gather the information that we needed, to research best practices, and meet with stakeholders. And this urgency ordinance did not apply to existing businesses. One of the key components of the proposed formula business ordinance is to allow the public to have a forum to weigh in on the formula business uses in the downtown. And without the ordinance, a formula business is currently a permitted use. So that means that if a formula business comes to town, they could go into a storefront and they might pull tenant improvements or permits, or they might get a sign permit, but they're a permitted use. And the ordinance would also allow the city to apply reasonable conditions to new businesses relating to things like design and aesthetics. The strategy for preparing the Formula Business Ordinance included examining precedent, conducting benchmarking, and looking at best practices. And one of the things that we know from past practice is that we want to make sure that we are not an anomaly in the marketplace. We also want to be mindful to prepare something that is legally defensible, so benchmarking is important. We also did extensive research documenting and analyzing existing downtown businesses and engaging our stakeholders in the community in the discussion about what this means for our downtown. In the past, the city has adopted special regulations for certain types of uses. For instance, right now we have regulations for financial institutions and personal services. And this was done for much the same reason that the formula of business is before this evening, to prevent multiplication and concentration of uses that might impair the vitality and diversity of our downtown. So in terms of benchmarking, we looked at cities throughout the country and cities in California in particular. And some of the commonalities include that each of the cities that has adopted one of these formula business ordinances has a very strong sense of place. And they want to make sure that there's vitality there and enhancement over the years. They also have an acknowledgement that some amount of formula businesses in the downtown is acceptable and it's good for the local economy. Most agree that what makes a business a formula use is that it's required to have some kind of a standardized characteristics with other business locations. And they all seem to use the conditional use permit for their review process. There's some differences between the cities we looked at, particularly when it comes to threshold of review. Well, how do you determine when you're not going to review one of these formula businesses? So we looked at a number of cities, and for example, San Francisco defines a formula business as 11 businesses anywhere in the world. Palo Alto, Malibu, and Arcata say 10 businesses in the United States. And Benicia restricts the definition to 4 in the 9-county Bay Area. So there's different ways of looking at that. As you can see here, about half of the formula businesses in the downtown core are retail and restaurants, whereas the other half is made up of services like banks and real estate brokers. The businesses are also pretty well spread out throughout the downtown core there. Formula businesses tend to generate very little sales tax because they're typically high volume, small to-go orders that you might see at Starbucks or Pete's. And as a result, only 10% of the sales tax revenue generated in the downtown comes from these formula businesses. And of the formula businesses that we do have, 10 are banks or real estate brokerages. 1 is a shipping store. 4 are retail stores. 6 are quick service or convenience restaurants. And we now have our first full-service formula restaurant in Apache's. While researching best practices and documenting downtown San Carlos, we reached out to the community to get some feedback on this ordinance, and we received some very valuable and insightful feedback that has influenced the preparation of this document. We took it to the Economic Development Advisory Commission, and they were generally supportive of the ordinance, and some of their input had to do with the assemblage of multiple storefronts, and they were concerned that if you have an existing formula business and they want to expand, they might expand into several storefronts or another storefront and get very large in the downtown. They also thought that formula businesses that serve an unmet need are more acceptable, and that formula businesses uses that the design of the storefronts is very important. Some formula businesses, as we know, use their storefront as signage, and that would be inappropriate in our downtown. Ordinance applicability. So where would this apply? So the ordinance would apply in the 6, 7, and 800 blocks, as you can see there on the map. And in the 1100 block, on both sides of the 1100 block, and on the south side of the 1200 block, we thought about the Samtrans building and talked about it. And we believe that the Samtrans building is different physically than the rest of our downtown. It's a big building. It's not the single-story sort of walkable pedestrian scale buildings, and it's not divided up like the rest of our downtown is. And so that was excluded from this. It's mostly realtors on the ground floor there. In terms of what you would have to do if you were a formula business, if the ordinance was approved, you'd have to get a conditional use permit to come into our downtown. And that means you'd have to go to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. So it would apply to new formula businesses, existing formula business relocations, and to get to the point that EDAC made, it would apply to formula businesses that would expand 10% or more. And in terms of the timing, a lot of the Commission, the EDAC, and the Planning Commission were concerned about time, and what we could do is process all these permits like design review and sign permits concurrently to speed things up. In terms of Planning Commission feedback, the proposed amendments, they believed when they had their commission meeting just this last week, they were concerned that it didn't achieve the goal of preserving existing independent uses in the downtown. The proposed amendments, they believed, would add a layer of regulation that may discourage new businesses or prevent existing businesses from relocating within the downtown. And although an opportunity for public comment on formula business uses in the downtown is welcome, the time and cost associated with the process should be reduced. Now, they did say that if the City Council moved forward with the ordinance, that they did suggest a change to the definition. And they also made a number of editorial changes to the definition. And one of the key things that they changed was the number from 10 to 15. So the definition that the Commission was presented with was 10 locations in the United States. And so they talked a lot about the threshold and perhaps raising that threshold to bring more up-and-coming businesses into the downtown without having to go through that process. We can talk about the editorial changes if you're interested later. And so that was their recommendation. And finally, the Planning Commission voted 4-1 to recommend that the City Council not adopt the ordinance regulating formula businesses in the downtown core. And that concludes my presentation, and we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Al? Mark?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that while I do have a number of questions, I also have about 3 or 4 slides that I would like to walk through when we have a discussion, so I'm not going to ask any questions at this point.
Okay. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Al, just so I'm clear, let's just assume a formula business is here already and it closes. And does a new formula business have to get a conditional use permit to move into that same space?
Yes.
And what would be I guess logic is the right word, I don't know, the thought process behind that? Since it was already there, why wouldn't it be grandfathered in?
Well, if it's a new business, it could be a different format. It could have different impacts. It might have different look, appearance, more impacts to parking and things like that. So those are the kinds of things that would be evaluated as part of a use permit.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ron?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The question I had was regarding this increase to 15 businesses or nationwide. How much of an impact do you think that would have on potential applicants? Is it a big deal? And I'm curious, how did they come up with 15%?
Well, it was the number 15. So
I'm sorry, I meant 15 businesses nationwide, not 15%. Sorry.
Well, as I noted, in the cities that we looked at, the general benchmark that we were looking at was 10 in the U.S. And one of the concerns was, let's say you have an up-and-coming business. Blue Line Pizza is an example. I think they have less than 10 locations, but they're somewhat of they look like a franchise business, but they've been a great part of our downtown. And so when you have an up-and-coming business, maybe some of those get to 10, but maybe they shouldn't be considered a formula business. So let's make it a little easier for some of these businesses that are reaching that threshold. And I think secondarily, one of the concerns was just the challenge of going through a use permit process and the cost of it. And so if you raise the bar, you give a few more businesses that are emerging in this marketplace to make it in under the bar and not have to go to a conditional use permit. So other than that, there wasn't a specific benchmark to a number in the marketplace. Okay.
The other thing I noticed that the CUP fee is $8,500. Is that flexible? Has that been adjusted over the years?
It's really not flexible. It's established by the City Council, so all the fees are adopted by the City Council, and we benchmark those fees to other cities in the marketplace. And we base it on time and materials for city staff. So it really, it may go up a little bit each year, maybe cost of living type of things, or sometimes the city holds it in a down market. The city may hold it where it is, but it hasn't changed very significantly over the years.
Is our fee in line with other cities of our size in the Bay Area?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if you can answer this question. I'm just curious. Has it been an impediment? Has a $8,500 fee been an impediment to businesses that do require a CUP, or do they tend to be larger businesses anyway? And who can afford it?
Generally, I think that the thinking is that if you're a franchise business, if you're a chain store, a formula business, then you have a larger footprint, economic footprint, and so you're more able to tap into, loans or resources to pay that fee. So it's maybe less of a concern for some of these larger businesses and more of a concern maybe for a smaller business that's emerging in the marketplace and gets right to that threshold, and it may be more difficult.
Just last question. Is there a difference between chain stores and franchises?
No, I would say they're the same thing.
They're the same. Okay. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Bob, did you have any additional questions?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? So this is a public hearing. I have several speaker cards. I will ask, out of respect for the other speakers, to try to hold your comments to 2 minutes. You'll see a yellow light and then a red light. My first speaker tonight is Steve Elliott. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Johnson, Vice Mayor Gracilli, and council members. My name is Steve Elliott, and I'm a San Carlos resident. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the proposed formula business ordinance and offer my perspective. I've spent the past 10 years working on land use, planning, and development issues in 3 nearby communities, Menlo Park, Redwood City, and Palo Alto. During this time, I've heard consistently from residents and planners in those communities that San Carlos is an example of a great downtown. Like most everyone here tonight, I love our downtown, and I want it to remain vibrant and healthy. I've heard from friends that don't want the downtown to change, and I agree that I like it the way it is now as well. But the fact is the downtown has changed and will continue to change. As businesses succeed or fail, customers' tastes change and rents go up or down. Ongoing change has enhanced our downtown. Since I've moved here, we've had many new businesses move onto Laurel Street, including formula businesses that the community embraces. These businesses may not have wanted to locate here if they had to engage in the potentially controversial conditional approval process being contemplated here. As we've seen recently, land use issues can be extremely contentious and divisive to a community and consume a costly amount of city staff and council time. This ordinance invites unnecessary community divisiveness to an area of our city that is thriving to the point that it is the envy of many nearby communities. Shortly after we moved to San Carlos, the city made changes to the lane configuration, parking, and sidewalk widths on Laurel Street. This is an important role of the city to provide a quality infrastructure, including pedestrian-friendly sidewalks, and create a pleasant experience that draws customers to downtown. Trying to manage which businesses will lease space in specific areas in the downtown is a well-intended idea, but creates too many potential unintended negative consequences, as our Planning Commission and other community members have pointed out. I urge you not to pursue this ordinance, and thank you for your hard work and study on the issue.
Thank you. Next, I have Angela Harper Peterson.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Honorable Mayor and City Councilman. My name is Angela Harper Pedersen, and I just want to make it really clear. I am a member of the Planning Commission, but I am not here today to speak as a Planning Commissioner or on behalf of my other Planning Commissioners. I've had more than enough time in the Planning Commission meeting to say my piece, and what I did say was encapsulated in the public record, and I trust that you guys all read that. I'm here because I thought of something literally just today that I thought would be important for your vote, and I wanted to go ahead and share it with you. I was craving Cuisinart, as I often do, and I was driving down the 1100 block of San Carlos Avenue, finding it a bit difficult to park. It occurred to me that the 1100 block of San Carlos Avenue has some additional parking challenges than the rest of Laurel Street. And so I am actually here asking that if you do go forward with an ordinance, that you consider not including the 1100 block of San Carlos Avenue at this time. The reason I didn't include the 1200 block of San Carlos Avenue is because Wheeler Plaza is literally right behind it, and I don't think it has the same psychological burden to parking that the 1100 block of San Carlos Avenue does. And psychological burdens to parking really do impact business a great deal. It's one of my side specialties, and I just wanted to go ahead and encourage you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Susan Hanna.
Good evening. My name is Susan Hanna, and I own Arranged for Comfort on Laurel Street. Al, I love the material you've put together, but I still don't see us one-person shops being counted, and we count. Since I last addressed you, I've been casually polling customers and community members that I meet. And people moved here and come here absolutely loving the unique character of Laurel Street and San Carlos. We are already seeing great changes. All the infill, the Wheeler Plaza, all the big development that's going on. And I love the balance that we have. I love coming and seeing my banker here and seeing my other neighbors who own businesses. And I don't want to lose that. As it happens, yesterday in the San Mateo Times, there was an article in the business section titled "Good Service and Atmosphere Keep Indie Retailers in the Game." And what it really talks about is how a small bookstore, for example, can't possibly compete with Amazon. But what they can do is they can specialize. And so when somebody goes into an independent bookstore like the Reading Bug, which I'm a huge fan of, they get to build a relationship with that store and with the people that work in that store that simply is not possible when you've got a big chain who's constantly going through employees. And those relationships, I think, among us as community members and as business owners and employees are precious, and we've got to put some thought into this before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Les Girdlestone.
Good evening. I'm Les Girdlestone. I spoke at the Planning Commission, so that's a public record, and I'll proceed with other comments. There are members of the City Council who have MBAs, City Council members who own businesses. I have a bachelor's degree in business, and nowhere have I ever come across a business plan that says government will select winners and losers. The economy, the citizens of San Carlos will always determine. Businesses come and go for economic reasons. Mayor, you have indicated that some citizens have approached you with regards to the fact that they have a concern about franchises being in town. I will accept that at face value. In honesty, I have never been told that. I have owned commercial property here for over 30 years. My father's owned commercial property for over 50 years. I've never had an owner of a business come to me and say, we're concerned about Susie Cakes being downtown. What they're concerned about is the internet. The internet commerce is hurting these businesses. They're really struggling, and they work real hard to bring in their customers. And it's not the fact that Patsy's in town or there's 2 Starbucks in town. They're concerned about the internet. Now, this ordinance does not provide any standard, any economic analysis, any criteria for an evaluation. We're asking a potential franchisee, sole proprietorship, maybe to come to San Carlos, plop down $8,500 on the pass line, wait 3 or 4 months to see if you guys will thumbs up or thumbs down, and you guys don't even have to explain your decision. The first franchisee that comes in that you slam and do not accept, you are sending a message throughout the Bay Area and all the other communities that San Carlos is no longer friendly to business. You're going to start falling in line with San Francisco and Berkeley, and I don't think anyone here wants that. All these businesses in town have coexisted. If you want your morning coffee, you can go down to Broiler Express, Vanilla Moon, Donut Delight, Plantation Coffee, the French La Boulangerie, or you can go to the franchises. It's free choice. The city has always had free choice. We live in that kind of economy. So if you don't want to support the Starbucks and the Pete's, that's fantastic. If you do want to support them, that's fantastic too. It's all great. The citizens have to have the choice. And real quick, in summary, I really think the thinking behind this is at least 2 years behind the current times of the internet economy, that no individual or body should stand up, thumbs up or thumbs down, voting on a business that meets all the ordinance requirements. I thank you for your consideration and for working on a council that is thankless. If you're an old goomer like me, remember Bob Dylan. You don't need the weatherman to tell you which way the wind's blowing. It's the internet economy. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Brandon Savage.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Council members. I'm Brandon Savage, a resident, along with my family of San Carlos, also part of the family that owns the Reading Bug. Just wanted to address, in January, we as business owners were invited to give feedback into this process, and we came away feeling like the many business owners that joined us gave very positive support of this ordinance, but unfortunately that support has been lost in some of the supporting materials that are part of now this hearing. So we want a chance to kind of express our opinions here, because instead I think we're left with the input and ideas from the landlords, four landlords, 3 of whom aren't residents of this community. So hopefully I can provide some of that feedback here today and represent a few business viewpoints of the businesses in the downtown. First, I think it's important that we be clear that this ordinance is discussing regulation on just 5 blocks of our downtown, and regulation that really just allows us to maintain a say in the types of businesses that we think can make up this unique downtown that we've grown over the years. This is not anyone blocking businesses from coming in. This is not anyone blocking important and change that's happening in this community. It is a small segment and part of what has made us a unique city that people flock to. And as a resident of this community, I have to say that part of the reason that we chose to renovate our home here rather than relocate was because this is a unique place that we love visiting the downtown from. And part of the reason that we chose to grow our business here was because we love the uniqueness that brought in a unique customer base that really understands the support that we bring to this community, because we are, after all, as business owners and as residents, part of this community. So we have a vested interest now in making this community thrive and in really supporting the residents and the children of this community. And that's something that you won't get with, large franchise operations moving in. So in summary, if it's not clear, totally support this ordinance. Really hope to see it pass. But also, I would urge you to please, if you're thinking of voting no, make sure that you receive input from the businesses of this community, and make sure that that's part of this permanent record before moving forward, because I don't think it's adequately reflected here. So thank you.
Thank you. So that's all the speaker cards that I have. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on behalf or on this particular item? Okay. If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Crystal?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
And Mayor Johnson?
Yes. And I will entertain a further motion.
Mr. Mayor, I will move that I will move to introduce ordinance number
1502.
1802, an ordinance of the city.
1502.
I'm sorry, 1502. All right, I'll start over. I move to introduce ordinance number 1502, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending chapters 18.05, 18.23, and 18.41 of the San Carlos zoning ordinance, Title 18 of the San Carlos Municipal Code, and define formula business and establish a permit process for formula business uses in the downtown core, 600, 700, and 800 blocks of Laurel Street, 1100 block of San Carlos Avenue, and the south side of the 1200 block of San Carlos Avenue.
Mr. Mayor, for the sake of discussion, I'll second that motion, but I reserve the right to possibly make an amendment or amendments to that, or possibly another direction. But I will second it for the point of discussion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Was Mark going to, were you going to have Mark?
Mark's light is not on, so if,
That you want, we're going to take?
I will, whoop, wrong button. My light's on now.
okay. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 slides that I'd like to walk through. Crystal, if you could put those up. That's the, that one. Thank you. Good, because I couldn't remember the name of the file as we were sitting here. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through, by the way, I will need the clicker. Is that Alf on the? I'm not going to go through the entirety of what's behind this, these 4 slides. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of months talking to quite a few of the business owners downtown. Thank you, Jay. Some of the property owners and many residents as well. So I think it's important that we start off by reflecting on what are we trying to do here. And let's see, my screen has just gone dark. There we go. Thank you. I've broken it down into 2 categories, both because the perspectives of the residents and the business owners, in my experience, are a little bit different. First and foremost, the residents that I've talked to, they want to preserve their favorite stores. Now, as you might imagine, there's a big difference of opinion about what exactly is a favorite store. Everybody has their own favorite store. But nonetheless, that's something that they'd like to see no change in. Secondly, the other thing that comes out when you talk to folks is they want to keep out what I call the hulks. They don't want Target or some other giant store opening up on Laurel Street. Frankly, based on what I know of the economics of the retail business, that kind of thing actually isn't going to happen in San Carlos because of the nature of our building stock. It's too small to attract that kind of business. And there are things we could do if we wanted to protect ourselves against that. The last thing the residents tend to focus on is they don't want to have unattractive branding in the downtown core. They don't want to have McDonald's arches next to Burger King's crowns versus next to In-N-Out Burger, whatchamacallit. And I'll come back to that because there are things I think we can do about it. Business owners that I've talked to have a different set of reasons for supporting this ordinance and or what they'd like the council to address. First, a lot of people I talk to, and you've seen this in the emails that we've gotten from some people as well, they want to reduce commercial competition. Now, many of our business owners will also privately then say, I know I'm not really supposed to be in favor of that, but nonetheless, that's what I'd like to do, if there is a way to do it. They also are more concerned, however, about the competition for increasingly scarce parking space. They really want to see that addressed. They're worried that a new store of any kind comes in, takes parking for their customers away, and then they lose customers. But the biggest issue by far that they're concerned about is they want to slow down or pause the rent increases that they've either experienced or they see happening in the near future. And those are the panoply of things that they're looking to see us support. Now, the problem that I see is that the ordinance doesn't really address the real issues that are on our table. First and foremost, we talked about branding. It's important to remember a local business can end up looking just as out of place as a chain store. That has nothing to do with whether you're a chain or a local business. It has to do with what your store looks like. Next, the ordinance doesn't really do anything to address the parking shortfall problem we have, or for that matter, to expand the retail area of the town. And the expanding of the retail area is potentially important because this is a supply-demand issue. Part of the reason space is so valuable and so expensive, and getting more so, is because there's not a lot of retail space. There are things we could do about that as well. Next is, intentionally or not, this ordinance seeks to restrain commercial competition. Now, we can debate about whether that's a good thing to do in this, in any given circumstance or not. I personally am not in favor of that. It reduces community choice. It also, in effect, increases residents' cost of living, which is not something that I particularly want to do. And then lastly, it complicates and politicizes opening a new business. We've talked about the $8,500 and the months of time that business owners would have to apply to this. But I had a phone call before the last Planning Commission meeting from a commissioner who said, look, I know where you're coming from on this, and I'm not asking your opinion about the ordinance, but I have a specific example of what I need to evaluate. How do I actually vote on this? How do I decide whether or not an applicant fits the rule or not? Because the rules are much more subjective than most of the other rules that we have on our books. So, next thing I want to point out is, in part of my research, we are not the first town that, as people have talked about, in trying to deal with these issues or have an anti-chain store ordinance. Los Gatos actually adopted this and went down this road many years ago, sometime before the Great Recession, so before 2008, 2009. And they did it for many of the same reasons that we had. They want to protect their downtown. They want to shift their chains to peripheral areas. And they also took the step of doing something we're not talking about doing, which is to regulate store size to encourage diversity. Because remember, again, if you put a limit on the maximum size of a store, you're naturally going to have more stores for any amount of square footage that's there. But their experience was kind of interesting, and it's worth us keeping in mind. The staff member I talked to in their economic development department specifically said, chain stores saved our downtown during the Great Recession. And the reason they saved it is for a very practical reason. As the way she put it is, people would come to town to go shop at Williams-Sonoma, and then they'd see all these other stores that they hadn't heard of before, and they'd go shop in them. So it was actually a draw. And what's very interesting to me is, starting last fall, they are currently reviewing whether they want to move beyond an anti-chain store ordinance. In other words, that they're not sure, given the change in the economic environment and the internet threats and whatnot, whether that's really the right thing to be doing anymore. I personally think we ought to listen to them and think hard about what we're doing here before we set it in stone. I'm going to close by saying that, to me, the reason I'm going to vote against this ordinance is it isn't going to achieve the primary goals that it set out for itself. And the reason for that is very simple. We tend to forget sometimes San Carlos is part of a larger world. Those arrows are designed to represent the economic forces that both come into our community and go out from our community. We're part of a larger network. And as a result, basically the potential for turnover is driven by property values, not business ownership. It's the fact that we live in a very desirable place to live in, the fact that we've spent a lot of time and effort to develop a great downtown, the fact that the regional economy is doing very well. That's what's driving property values, and that's what's driving the potential increases in rents that have people very concerned, not business ownership. And finally, I think it's important to remember that part of the way that any downtown survives is people have to reinvest in it from time to time. The building owners have to reinvest in their buildings. If we don't want to have to do that as a public agency and dip into the public purse in order to try and keep our downtown up, we want to make sure that we maintain that vibrancy that allows businesses to come here and allows investment to take place. So that's it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've kind of gone back and forth on this. I've been sort of 51-49 for a good part of it. But I started thinking about the lesson of Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is, everybody knows what Trader Joe's is. I'm sure they've got a lot of businesses around the area. The lot where Trader Joe's stands today used to be a restaurant called the Dollhouse, where I had my first job. And where Trader Joe's was the parking lot. But the reason I bring that up is that for a long time people wanted a Trader Joe's in this town. And we had a lot of people who wrote Trader Joe's and said, please come to town. They said, who are you people? Where is San Carlos? They just didn't know. But through a lot of persistence on the part of our residents, Trader Joe's eventually paid attention, and they eventually came to town. And they've been a wonderful addition, particularly in the south part of town where I live. I go to Starbucks almost every day. I go to Pete's. My bank is downtown. Pachi's, I've eaten there. Boulanger. I frequent all of these chain stores. I think that they sort of fit in and they add to the fabric of the downtown. I'm not opposed to them. I really think this is about just adding a level of review, allowing the public to weigh in and say what they want to say, positive or negative. I could be wrong, but I don't see this as being a business killer for downtown. Now, having said all that, if there's some modifications that Bob has hinted that he might want to make, I'm open to them. I'm not sure that the ordinance as written is necessarily the way we go, so I'd be open to seeing what modifications my fellow council members have.
Thank you, Ron. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions, if I could, for staff. Mr. Savay, maybe you can help me. I apologize, I should have asked these before, but is there any restriction, let's say Mr. Smith buys a piece of property on Laurel Street, and let's say there's 4 stores there, 4 different stores, whatever they are. Could be formula, non-formula, whatever. Is there any restriction on Mr. Smith going, assuming the leases are up or whatever, saying, I'm going to make this 1 store, not 4 stores?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. It's been mentioned here, and I don't know if it's true or not. What do you anticipate the time would be for a conditional use permit if it started on day 1? How many days would it take to get through the process?
8 to 10 weeks. We did the 1 and 7 weeks recently that went to the Planning Commission under
2 months, ballpark, 2 to 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there a reason that we couldn't do this for 6 months instead of a year?
It's up to you. No.
Okay.
There is no reason.
All right.
Unless the city attorney finds that there's
Is there a reason, Mr. City Attorney, that we couldn't do it for 6 months instead of a year?
You mean on the extending the urgency ordinance?
Yes.
No, it's not on the agenda tonight, but you could extend it at your next meeting if that was something the council wanted to do.
So in other words, I can't change the year tonight. Right now it's set up for a year. I can't amend that to.
Yes, I actually think that
I might
they
be
could, yeah.
missing something on this one, but
Talking about the ordinance.
The ordinance itself could be amended because right now it's a pilot for 1 year, but they could amend it to just 6 months, right?
Well, I might be wrong, but it's not set up. But this is the permanent ordinance that would put into play the zoning change on a permanent basis. But the council always has the ability to look back at an ordinance and change it in hindsight. So if the policy direction is let's see how it goes, and then you could come back and look at the ordinance again, that's possible too.
So I apologize, I'm confused, but that's nothing unusual. What are we voting on for length of time tonight then?
Yeah, right now it's a permanent proposal. Permanent.
Permanent,
Yes.
forever?
Yes.
Okay, so there's no year. I apologize, I misread that.
There is a way, and what I thought you were asking was you can extend an urgency ordinance for up to 10 months and 15 days from its current, up to 10 months and 15 days. You've already extended it to 120 days, so you could extend it for another 8 months or so, if I'm getting my math correct.
Okay, so in theory, we could make a motion to amend the motion and say we want to extend the urgency ordinance for 6 months.
You couldn't do that tonight because we haven't put on the agenda extending the urgency ordinance.
Should you choose to, you could amend to add a sunset provision.
That you could do tonight. You've noticed you could sunset this particular ordinance.
So in other words, instead of being permanent forever, we could say this is going to be a 6-month ordinance. We could do that.
You could do that.
Permanent 6-month ordinance. Okay, thank you. Well, I'm just trying to get the words down because
you could put into the ordinance another section that says the ordinance sunsets and pick a date. It could be a year, it could be 6 months.
Okay. Those are the questions I had. I have comments. I don't know, is this the time to make comments or later on?
You're welcome to make comments. Ron had an additional question. Did you want to take that?
Sort of a comment and a question. I remember when I was on the Planning Commission, this was back in the late 80s, we had an in lieu parking fee for restaurants, and it was pretty steep. And I think we put a moratorium on it for 6 months, and then we extended it. I don't know how many times we extended it, but we finally did away with it, and then the rest is history, so to speak. So there is precedent for this, correct? I mean, this is something that we can extend, and we can. What happens like Bob says, we sunset this after 6 months? We can just revisit, or we can do it for 8 months, and then we can say we think we want to do it. We want to make it permanent, or we think it was a bad idea.
Yes, you can do that.
All those are within our purview. Okay.
So I do want to make sure if his comments appropriate, Mr. Mayor.
Mark, I think I saw your light on for a second and then it went away. So.
It was because I'm trying to figure out how to say what I want to say, so I've turned the light off. So
okay.
Pick somebody else.
Great. Bob, go for it.
Well, I do want to make sure that everyone understands that at one point I think Jeff remembers, and I'm sure Craig probably does, before I was on council, there was a moratorium on banks and nail salons or personal services. This has been done before. I guess those are still on the books, I would assume. Okay, that if they come in, if a new bank wants to come in or a new personal service type business wants to come in, they have to do a conditional use permit. Although there's so many nail salons, of course, we're only talking about 3 blocks here. Right. 600 or 4 blocks, 1,100 also. All right. Well, I'd like to hear the other comments before I make an amendment to a motion, if I do.
Mark, you want to make a comment on this topic? I'm happy to share some comments after that.
But if you'd like, since I already did, if you'd like to go first. Go for it. And thank you. I finally remembered how I wanted to phrase this. One of the things that struck me when I had an opportunity to review this revised language at the Economic Development Subcommittee that Mayor Johnson and I both serve on with staff is, to me, a lot of some elements of the language make perfect sense to put in there for all businesses. In other words, there were things having to do with look and feel, things having to do with impact on the look and feel. To Bob's point about we have rules on the books of not having too many personal service businesses, not having too many banks in a certain area. Those things actually make sense to me in terms of keeping a healthy downtown business. The only part that concerns me is discriminating between ownership models. In other words, as I mentioned in my comments earlier, if we want to be concerned about look and feel impact on the downtown, which I think is a reasonable thing to do, let's be concerned about it for every applicant, not just for chains. In other words, we want to make sure that everything fits in, blends in. Somebody's not planning on putting in a 21st century steel and glass thing that doesn't fit in with the downtown. So I offer that as an opportunity to my colleagues to think about. I think there are basically better ways to accomplish the real goals here rather than this particular ordinance.
Thank you, Mark. So I'll make a few comments on behalf of the ordinance, and then we'll see if folks want to make any amendments. So I want to appreciate all the time that staff has put into this, the comments from my colleagues. I want to appreciate the folks who spoke tonight, including some of the property owners, who've invested in the town and who have, created generous lease policies that have promoted a lot of local businesses, and we really appreciate that. And to me, the reason that I'm attracted to this, the reason that I propose this, is because I think that downtown is more than a shopping center. And ultimately, to me, that's kind of fundamentally the question on the table is, what is the purpose of your downtown? Is it focused mostly on commerce, or is it public space? we have a area in town where we have a lot of chain stores, and I go there a lot. It's the San Carlos Marketplace. We have a Best Buy and a Wingstop and a GameStop and maybe some other stores that end with stop. And we, but you know, we don't have parades in the San Carlos Marketplace. We don't have a Goblin Walk in the San Carlos Marketplace. We don't have a farmer's market there. People don't sell Girl Scout cookies in the San Carlos Marketplace. People don't ask their friends to go have coffee in the San Carlos Marketplace. It's a place, we don't, you know, string Christmas lights in the San Carlos Marketplace. It's a place that people go to shop, and it does that very well. And the goal of that part of town is to maximize revenue. You know, be a great shopping center, allow people to get in, get out, and shop. But downtown is very different. Downtown is the center of our civic life. It's where you go to hang out with your friends and family. I get told all the time by people who don't live in San Carlos, oh, I was in San Carlos the other day, I thought of you. And they say, and what's the next thing out of their mouth? You guys have such a great downtown. I think that outside of, you know, when people look for a place to live, you know, they're looking at a place they can commute to work, what has good schools. That's, you know, that's the minimum criteria. But what hooks them and what makes them want to stay is the downtown. And so the question is really what defines that downtown, and is whether or not we have currently we have an eclectic group of locally owned small businesses. And I think the question for my colleagues is that core? Does that matter? Is that part of the public space? Would changing that to something else be a loss for the downtown? And that's something I think that reasonable people can disagree on. But for me, the fact that we have locally owned small businesses, ownership in town is core, and it defines that public space. It is a reflection on the town's values. You know, I would ask you all to do a thought experiment. If you were to get in your car and drive out of town and I said, find a Chipotle, find a Subway store, could you do it? Of course. Very easy to find it. If I said, drive out of town, find a downtown with a great mix of locally owned small businesses. You know, I'm sure you could find a place, but another place that's comparable to what we have today in San Carlos, I think would be tough to find. I think it's rare. I think it's precious. I think it's worth preserving. And so the question is, so that's my point of view, is that mix defines that public space. It's a reflection on who we are. It creates identity. And then the question is, well, is there really a threat? Is this a problem that we need to solve? And I think the answer is yes. And the reason the answer is yes is because in the next 6 months, there's going to be at least 12 storefronts in the historic downtown that are going to be demolished and rebuilt. And all of those storefronts were supporting locally owned small businesses, which have all been displaced. Some of them have found other locations. Some of them will move back. But what's happening is that the economy is great and rents are rising, and a lot of development that in the past didn't make a lot of economic sense is finally penciling out. And the concern is that you're going to just see more of this, and this is going to put pressure on locally owned small businesses. They're going to get displaced. I'm not focused on protecting any one business. I'm focused on trying to protect the whole. But when somebody gets displaced and there's an empty storefront, the question is it an equal playing field, or do your national chains have an advantage? And I think they do have an advantage. They have name recognition. They have the ability to lose money on a particular location. They have relationships with developers. Developers like them because they're likely to be successful. And they may be appropriate in some cases, but the concern is that a big proliferation will have a cumulative negative detrimental impact to the loss of identity. So what are we proposing here? We're not proposing to ban chain stores. We currently have a ban on any additional banks. We currently have a ban on any additional nail salons. This is a relatively light regulation. It's a regulation that's been done in at least 20 other cities in the state of California, and those cities have not gone bankrupt. It has not been challenged in court. And what it does is it gives the public an opportunity to have a say, which today they do not. And I think finally what I'll say is there's a question here as to, do we want to, as a council, and we see Wheeler Plaza coming, we see the 600 block being under construction, do we want to be proactive or reactive, and what are our options in those cases? So if we pass this, now the public has an opportunity to comment when a new chain store wants to come in. If this leads to a negative economic cycle, if it leads to a lot of empty storefronts, we have a lot of options. We can modify it, we can suspend it, we can rescind it, we can do a lot of different things. If you don't do anything and you see, like we've seen in a lot of neighboring communities, a shift away from locally owned businesses to formula and national retail, we have no recourse. We cannot say, sorry, Mr. Chipotle, we've decided that you can't be here anymore, and will you please leave? And so the strategy here is, if you see development happening in your town, if you see rents rising, if you believe that it's important to preserve this sense of public space, and you have a tool that's been tried in other communities, why should you not do it? Why should you not try it? Because the alternative is a long-term potential loss of identity of our core civic center that we have no recourse. So that's why I'm supporting it. I think there's been a good debate. I'm glad we're talking about this. I think this is an issue that comes up a lot in public discussion, but we haven't had policy items that we can talk about it. I hope we continue to talk about it. With that, I'll see if any of my colleagues wants to make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I want to preface my adjusted or amended motion that I was on council when the second Starbucks opened. Now there's 3, but the second one opened, and there was a great deal of discussion about whether we needed a second Starbucks. And now, of course, we have the second Starbucks as well as Pete's. I, of course, cannot personally ever comment on these because I don't drink coffee, so I have no idea why people go there, but that's another story. But having said that, the world didn't crash when the second Starbucks opened. But there was a great deal of discussion just along the same line, and we didn't do anything about it. I'm not saying we should have, but anyway, it didn't happen. I've always been more of, as Mr. Girdlestone spoke to, a free market person relative to the market will take care of itself one way or the other way. So, but having said that, I certainly am persuaded by many of the arguments that our mayor has mentioned, as well as Mr. Collins. So I would like to make an amended motion. It may get a second, it may not. I would amend the motion that we make it 15 units. Is units the right term? I'm not sure what the term is. 15 stores instead of 11 on the motion, and that we extend it for 6 months and see where we are in 6 months. Even though we can't change anything that's permanent, we always can change anything. But permanent to me is just is a word that I don't know that I want to use on this one. So for me, I would make an amended motion that we make it 15 units and a 6-month extended for 6 months on an emergency basis for this item.
Could I ask my colleague? And so why 6 months and not, say, a year?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, I think a lot of things are going to be happening in the next 6 months, and I think it's going to give us a picture. We're also going to have real-time information. There's a lot of conjecture about what's going to happen, and conjecture is wonderful, but when you predict the future, a lot of times you're not correct, no matter what you do or not do. So your arguments persuaded me that we should do something, and I'd like to do it for a period of 6 months. And in 6 months, if we find it's working, maybe we do make it a permanent. If it isn't working, well, we only made it for 6 months, and we can get rid of it. Not saying we couldn't if we made it permanent, but it gives us a time frame that it's going to come back to us. in 6 months. It's guaranteed to come back to us in 6 months. And I think we ought to extend it, as I said, larger to 15 instead of 11, and that gives it a little bit more perspective of folks that have a formula business with 11 or 12 could theoretically come in if you consider those formula. I'm not sure. They're still a smaller business than a McDonald's or some of the other folks that are big. So,
Mr. Mayor, before I offer a second, can I just ask a question of staff? When does that 6-month clock start?
Well, let me just clarify the motion, because and maybe I wasn't clear earlier, so I apologize for that. On tonight's agenda is not an extension of the urgency ordinance. What you have tonight is the permanent proposed replacement ordinance. So to meet the intents of Councilmember Grisilli, we could add to this ordinance tonight a sunset that would end this ordinance, but it wouldn't be an extension of the urgency ordinance.
Thank you for again, terminology is everything. So I will amend my comments to make it to have it sunset in 6 months. When would be the date that would start, Mr. Rubens? When would it start?
30 days. It would start, the next meeting on the agenda would be the adoption of that ordinance, and then it would take effect 30 days after that.
April 14th.
And then it would extend into the fall.
It's almost approximately 8 months is what it's going to almost be.
Well, you could set an arbitrary date. So
you could set an arbitrary.
You could say November 1st it sunsets, or December 1st, or January 1st.
You could have it, yes, any one of those. That is one way to do it. Instead of a 6 month, you could say it. So right now, yes, the urgency ordinance stays in effect under the current timeline until this ordinance comes into play. So the timing is correct that you will continue to regulate during the entire period. So the urgency ordinance, which does regulate formula businesses, will extend all the way through April, and then the permanent ordinance, or the sunsetting permanent ordinance, would take effect after that.
May, June, July, August, so it would be like August 15th or something like that.
It would probably go longer than that, probably October or November.
No, but I'm just saying, if my colleague mentioned a specific date, so we could say, well, we're going to make it sunset on August 15th.
You could pick that date. The policy question is whether that's enough time to evaluate the ordinances.
No, I understand, but I mean, we're going to have that right now, if we started now, we've got March, April, May, June, July, August. So that's 6 months, which fits my great idea or bad idea, whatever it is.
Okay. So yes, if that's what your intention is, yes, you could pick August. That would be about 6 months.
You said it's on now. It's on now.
Currently, we have an urgency ordinance in place.
On the books, and it'll stay on until, as you mentioned, a date specific. So I would say then, for the 99th Amendment, August 15th and 15 units. That would be my amended motion, if someone would like to second that.
If I could just weigh in here real quick, just from a practical point of view, how about if we said had to be reviewed, or it would expire the day after the first council meeting in September, because we do tend to take a break around that time of year, so we may not have council meetings that work real well. So if you gave yourself the first council meeting in September to be the
first council meeting in September.
Well, September 12th, so September 13th.
Is that right? Okay, so September 13th then instead of August 15th.
All right, are we good with that?
All right. Second that?
I second that.
All right.
Okay. And so if I'm understanding correctly, that's being offered as a substitute motion?
Right.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the substitute motion? Hearing none, Crystal, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Overt?
No.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson, before we move on to the next item, may I bring up two agenda-setting topics sparked by this?
You may, and I also have one thing to take out of order, but go for it.
Okay. The first thing is back in December, when this issue first came before the council as an urgency ordinance, I recall asking a number of questions of both my colleagues on the dais and of staff about what was the urgency. And to be honest, my takeaway from that was I didn't really get a very clear answer about what the urgent issue was. The only other time since I've been on the council when we adopted an urgency ordinance, the imminent threat, so to speak, was very clear. I knew exactly what it was. In fact, without personalizing it too much, I could always see the gentleman who was related to the threat in the audience when we were talking about stuff. So my first request for, see if my colleagues are interested in doing this, I'd actually like to change our rules of procedure, or whatever you want to call them, so that if we adopt an urgency ordinance, we have to specify reasonably clearly and precisely what the imminent challenge, threat, issue, or whatever is that we're supposedly responding to.
Is there anybody else who would like to see that agendized? I don't see any takers.
Okay. Then let me move on to the next one. Mayor Johnson, I think you did a very good job. I don't agree with you at all on the arguments you made, but you did a very good job of presenting them.
Thank you very much.
No, it's always good. It's always good to have well-thought arguments on both sides of an issue. But quite clearly, this ordinance was adopted in large part in response to, as the mayor was explaining, in response to the economic pressures that our local businesses are operating under. And we can agree or disagree about whether we should respond and how we respond. But given that, I actually think that the council really needs to take up as an urgent item, as soon as it possibly can, a much bigger effect on our citizens and our residents of the current economic environment, which are for all the people who rent homes or apartments in San Carlos, who are dealing with the exact same kinds of economic pressures. We all read about in the newspapers and other communities about people being displaced, and I apologize, I don't know how many people are actually being displaced in San Carlos, but I'm sure there's quite a few of them. I think we need to take that up as an urgent item very quickly. I think, frankly, having taken the step to do this for the business community, I think we have a duty to do it for our residents, because, after all, ultimately it's our residents who we represent.
So I agree with you, and I think we took the step recently to establish a housing subcommittee. It's you and Ron who are both serving on that, is that correct?
No, it's Bob and me.
Oh, Bob and Ron. You know, this is my opinion, which is that we formed that subcommittee for precisely the purpose of generating policy items that can come back to the council. So,
well, with all due respect, Mr. Mayor, since we adopted the urgency ordinance on the business side of the House without that kind of input, so far as I understand it, I think the discussion could certainly get started by tasking staff with coming back with explaining to us what the dimensions of the problem are and what possible approaches we could follow are. That could be a nice counterpart to the work of the subcommittee. And as I said, to me, I feel compelled out of a sense of duty. If we're going to do this one thing, we really need to do the other. Others may disagree.
Yeah, I don't know, Ron, if you want to weigh in, or Bob, you guys are on the subcommittee.
I don't know. Yes, there's urgency about. We have a very deep housing crisis, but I think I'd like to talk about it a little bit more. We have another. We can certainly bring it up, agendize it at the next council meeting. But I think I'd like to know more about what shape it would take. I'm kind of at loose ends here. That, you know, you're suggesting something that I fundamentally agree with, but I don't know what form that would take. I need to think about it and at least have an idea of how we would approach it, so that we could, you know, come up with a plan. That's all I'm saying.
And I can certainly appreciate that. You know, on the other hand, and I'm not exactly sure what we ought to do, but given, for example, the way this ordinance that we just worked on was initially structured, I think there are probably things analogous to that could be done very quickly. Whether we chose to do them or not is separate, is a different issue, I agree. But in terms of bringing them forward for discussion, I don't think that's going to take a lot of time and effort to do.
Bob, you want to weigh in here?
I tend to disagree with my colleague about it's not going to take a lot of time and effort. I think it's going to take a lot of time and effort, and that's fine. It's not saying it shouldn't. But I would be more attuned to the fact of, since we have a housing subcommittee, to schedule a meeting for the housing subcommittee, which we haven't done yet. I'll be straight up on that. Schedule that meeting and talk about whatever comes down the pike on that, and through the committee process, bring it up to the entire city council, as opposed to discussing it on the other side. Because I mean, in my opinion, you're almost like you're dual tracking that. Why do we have a housing subcommittee then? So, I mean, in my opinion, I think we should go through the housing subcommittee. So, it's my 2 cents.
All right.
I would agree.
Okay. Well, I agree as well. I think if I could ask you two gentlemen at the next meeting to report back on when that's scheduled, or if it hadn't happened by the next meeting.
May I also add that I think I don't agree with the approach. I agree with the desire, and I know my colleagues will work on it quickly. Let me just say that personally, one of the reasons I hope that we will, in fact, come to terms with this, whatever we choose to do quickly, is because I already hear rumblings in the community about how the action that we took tonight has been misinterpreted as, oh, well, of course the council is acting to protect the local businesses, but they don't care anything at all about the local residents. And again, I don't hold that opinion. I always try to correct it from people when I hear it, but I do hear that already.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So moving on. When we did public comment, item 5, on items not on the agenda, I looked only to the speaker cards that I had, but I neglected to ask if anyone else wanted to speak on an item not on the agenda. So my apologies to Mr. Stogner, and I appreciate you waiting patiently, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to speak.
Hi, City Council. My name is Michael Stogner. I live at 645 Prospect Street. And I just wanted to talk about, I wasn't able to be at the meeting, but I watched the meeting on TV where we were talking about license plate readers, and there was some advancement with it. And I personally am a big fan of license plate readers for certain categories, for what I call live data, which is stolen car, kidnapping, carjacking, Amber Alert. So something connected to a police officer that can do something about it at that moment. I am not a big fan of data stored, especially when it's stored at a fusion center that has private partners that you don't know who the private partners are. And once they get control of data or see data, it's gone. So, and then the other part that I just wasn't clear at, and I watched the meeting twice, I heard our chief, I thought he said we received a gift of $60,000 of equipment, and I wasn't able to find out who gave us that gift. So I'm just asking if we could just identify the gift giver on the website, and so was it one person, two person, and who actually got the gift? Was it given to our police chief, or was it given to the city of San Carlos? So just sort of to recap, I'm a big fan of the product on cars, not necessarily permanent locations, because the bad guys can know where they are and then get around it. And then the other so who gave the gift? And then the question is, why would somebody give us a $60,000 gift? It kind of indicates that there's value somewhere. And the value, I believe, as a victim's advocate, I believe the value is in the data. So thank you very much, and thank you for putting me in tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sorry to take you out of order. Thanks very much. Ron, did you want to say something?
All I want to say was maybe we could have the chief get back to Mike. I know that I believe it was a grant. I don't remember the specific source,
yeah,
but it was a grant.
We can look into it.
We can get you an answer. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. We'll move on to new business. Item 8A, consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing staff to issue a special event permit for a year-round farmers market on Sundays in downtown San Carlos for a one-year pilot period. Mr. Save.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. As noted, this is a request by the Chamber of Commerce to move the hot harvest nights from Thursday nights to Sundays. And this was presented previously to the council, and a number of issues and concerns were brought up at that meeting, and one of them was parking. Some of the existing businesses, particularly the restaurants, have some issues with regard to how parking works on Thursday night and how it affects their business. Moving it to Sunday, at least staff believes there would be more businesses closed on Sundays, and so there would be more ample parking as a result of that. And in addition, one of the other key issues is where do the vendors park? And the Chamber has worked to get some off-site parking over at the Kelly Moore site to park those vendors off-site, so that would further reduce the impact on parking on Sundays. And then one of the other issues that was discussed is sidewalk street cleaning, and the city had been doing street cleaning on a quarterly basis, but has reduced that during the drought. The chamber has committed to doing it 2 times in addition per year. Staff is recommending that if this does move forward, then the chamber should do it 4 times a year, and the city should continue on with what we do. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Bouchard, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce.
Good evening, Dave.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. We really appreciate this time back on the agenda, especially on such a busy evening. Many of you have, is that clicker? I'm going to go through a few brief slides here and reiterate a little bit of what we covered at the last City Council meeting. And for the benefit of the audience, addressing those concerns and questions that were brought up at that meeting, as well as some that were brought up at the through the Shape San Carlos poll.
Clicker problems tonight.
Helps to see a green light that I don't see anymore. Let's see if this works. Okay. With downtown San Carlos as busy as it is in the evenings, and given the impact of limited parking on downtown merchants, we are proposing to discontinue Hot Harvest Nights on Thursday evenings and replace it with a year-round farmers market on Sundays. We believe that replacing the Thursday night market with a Sunday daytime farmers market will help alleviate congestion in the downtown on Thursday evenings. Additionally, the influx of residents and visitors to downtown on a typically slow business day will benefit restaurants and retailers alike. Our proposal also includes shifting the layout of the market from the 700 block of Laurel Street to both the 6 and 700 blocks, or a portion of both, of Laurel Street, in addition to a section of Cherry Street, for the purpose of preserving easy access to the free public parking lots in the vicinity. And I'll show an aerial map of that in a minute that describes the area. The proposed layout preserves the number of vendors the market can accommodate at about 60 each week. We also assume that in the off-season, the market can be scaled back to just the 600 block of Laurel Street and a portion of Cherry Street, accommodating closer to 30 to 40 vendors. And we propose starting the year-round market on Sunday, June 5th. Here's the kind of an aerial view of the map. In yellow, the proposed area or layout showing Cherry Street. From the south, it starts at the crosswalk at the Bank of America, and north at the approximate location of where the Foodville building is currently, and will be replaced by Valley Parking during construction of Wheeler Plaza. Now, I'd like to address some of the concerns that were raised at the last City Council meeting on January 25th, as well as some of the residents' comments through the Shape San Carlos survey that was conducted in December. First of all, competition with Belmont or other Sunday markets, particularly as it relates to gaining quality vendors. Most vendors have the ability to staff multiple markets. Initially, the change may be a little bit difficult for a select number of vendors to accommodate, but with time, we think that they will realize that San Carlos is just too good of a market not to participate. And regarding market customers, for most of those who shopped regularly at our Thursday night farmers market, many of them was their only market that they had to visit during the week, and we believe that they will all become customers of a Sunday market. Parking issues. We believe public parking to be less constrained morning and midday on Sundays than on Thursday afternoons, as fewer businesses in the downtown are open and fewer employees are in the area. Farmers market vendor vehicles will not be parked in the downtown area on Sundays, because many of them will drop off loads and move on to other markets for that day, or will park off-site, as previously mentioned. And we will encourage customers, residents, and visitors alike to either walk, ride their bikes, or take public transit. Some in the survey, Shape San Carlos survey, did not like the idea of any street closure at all, so location was an issue for them. However, over the past several years, the Chambers looked at a number of potential locations for a year-round market to no avail. Only one other possible location has presented itself on the east side in the area of Devil's Canyon Brewery. And although this is an interesting and viable area to hold a farmer's market, it would require nearly all customers to drive. We mentioned vendor parking. Several vendor parkings will be accommodated, or some. Possibly the larger vehicles, the box trucks, within the footprint of the market area, while others will be parked over at the Kellymore headquarters on Commercial Street, which is a short 0.4, almost half a mile walk from there to the market site, which is certainly doable. Al mentioned our participation in the city street and sidewalk cleaning, which we will gladly do. Also, during our weekly farmers market Thursday nights, we were usually closing up around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, where it was dark, and it was very difficult to catch all the debris that would end up after the farmers left. Daytime market would be much easier to catch any vendors that did not clean up their space after the market was over. So we feel that there was going to be a lot better control over that type of activity, not to mention that we can request certain vendors who sample fruits and vegetables that sometimes end up ground in the pavement to use tarps to catch some of that debris. Also, being a Chamber of Commerce, we want to be sensitive to the businesses who indicated that this would cause them to possibly lose business. And we're certainly not doing this to cause any business to lose business. However, some have indicated that they will be impacted or could be impacted by this. However, the market will be laid out to the extent possible to alleviate some of their concerns. We'll work with merchants to address any concerns, monitor the impacts, and make adjustments as needed. Additionally, when the market contracts in size from the 700 to presumably the 600 block during the off-season, the concerns of merchants on the 700 block may be further alleviated. There's some question, why can't we just keep Thursday night hot hours nights? In our opinion, that's not sustainable for many reasons. We've mentioned parking and other issues, and you can't do a Thursday night market year round because it's it gets dark earlier in the evenings during certain times of the year. So we're limited in that respect as well. We've talked about and asked this question on the Shape San Carlos poll about keeping the streets open following the end when the market closes for additional activities for the community to use the streets for other uses. In the past, as an example, the San Carlos Parks and Recreation Foundation would put up a carousel or a carnival ride as a fundraiser for their programs, and they were able to take advantage of the crowds that were already existing on Laurel Street for our farmers market. So that's just an example of something that could possibly happen. We've talked about dining events on Laurel Street, closing the street and having communal dining and celebrating all the restaurants that are in our area. So those are just an example of some of the activities that could occur during an activity like this, and that requires a little more thought and preparation. Once, if approved for this, we would certainly start planning and working with the businesses downtown as well as the city on what that would look like and the frequency and that kind of thing. The question was asked, why an entire year? Couldn't we have a market for half a year? And basically, it's like starting over again. Thursday nights was a little different because we were kind of a known quantity. Everybody was waiting for us to come back in May of every year. However, the first couple of months were a little slow because it took people a little while to get back into their routines and return to the market. And that would happen if we did it with a seasonal market. Not only that, most weekend markets are expected to be year-round, and most farmers who commit to something like this want to commit to something that's year-round as well. And there was a question, what happens during the winter months if the weather's bad? Most markets that are year-round are rain or shine. People, they expect it, and the diehards will come out and shop if it's raining, and it usually doesn't rain for a lengthy period of time anyway, so that should not be a deterrent to anyone at all. And finally, fresh produce. We didn't want to reduce the market to just a few vendors selling their prepared foods, obviously. However, there are a large number of growers out there that produce year-round. So we would, have a good array and a good mix of both fresh produce and specialty foods at our market. And we came up with a new logo. Certainly can't use the Hot Harvest Nights logo anymore if that's not applicable. So we came up with a nice new logo for our event. The farmers market has been a great addition to the community as well as the Bay Area. It's well known. We attract from all over the peninsula, and we believe that tradition will continue if we move the markets to a Sunday. So, in closing, our request is that the City Council issue a special event permit on a pilot basis for 1 year. This will allow us to test the Sunday market concept, adjusting it throughout the year to suit the needs of downtown businesses and the community, and we can also expand and contract the market based on the number of vendors and adapt the layout to construction and special events in the downtown as needed. One other note I might make as well, that the advantage of having a Sunday market for vendor parking, we could not, make use of Kelly Moore parking lot, for example, on a weeknight, but it is available on a Sunday. In addition, I think the library doesn't open on a Sunday until 1 o'clock, so there's available parking on 2 levels, the garage and the surface parking lot. And finally, the Thursday night market, for those of you who have been out there when we were clearing the streets of the vehicles that are parked there for lunch and other time. They're already down there, they're parked, and we have to basically vacate all those vehicles. Sometimes they don't all get driven off without the need of a tow truck. And that's one thing that this would eliminate, is having cars parked on the street. We would go in before they're actually there. Plus the manpower wouldn't be necessary to the extent that it is on a Thursday night, with the CSOs and the Sheriff's Office being involved in helping to close the street. So with that, any questions?
Thank you very much, Dave. Questions for Dave? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dave. And by the way, thank you for all the time that you and the other chamber members had spent talking to me in between this time and the last time we talked about some of my other issues. Just a couple of quick questions. When I was reviewing the material for tonight, I thought at one point we were talking about also embedding in the permit keeping the street closed for some time after the farmers market closes, not for the cleanup, but actually for on-street dining.
Right.
And I'm not sure I don't think I saw it in here.
That's a part of that. Well, we term it, for lack of a better term, open street Sundays. So it was a proposal that was brought up. If we're going to have the market on Laurel Street from essentially 10 to 2, the street could remain closed afterward at some interval, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, or whatever we decide. Collectively, the city, the merchants downtown, and the chamber, what that looks like.
Is that part of what we're voting on tonight?
Actually, you're voting on the market. That's something that would have to come, the discussion would come separately.
That's fine, because I have as you know, I have other questions about that aspect of things, which I don't want to go into tonight, because I want to get them resolved. So we're only voting on the market.
That's correct.
Good. Okay. Second question is, there was some discussion in the staff report about the chamber being willing to agree to do some additional street cleaning, and the city staff had in the report had indicated there's a difference. There's sort of a bid-ask spread between what the chamber has said they're willing to step up to and what the city is asking for. Right. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, as Al mentioned, the city has been doing it on a quarterly basis, with the exception of recently because of the drought. It's scaled back to my knowledge. We were proposing to add 2 more times to that quarterly to make it a 6th time every other month, essentially. However, staff is recommending that we do it 4 times. So,
which would make it?
Well, depending on how often the city does it, we were looking at 4 times from the standpoint of the chamber participating in that cleaning program.
I'm just trying to figure if what you were is every other month. What does it end up being, like every 6 weeks or something?
It's 6 months. 6 months of work every other month, basically. Yeah.
Is the chamber willing to consider doing that?
Well, we'll commit to doing 4.
Okay, which is what the staff had asked for.
Right, exactly.
All right, fine. Yeah. And last question is, if the opportunity were to present itself, and mainly, among other things, it would have to depend on dealing with the parking challenge. Would the chamber be willing to consider relocating perhaps the winter months of the farmers market to a different section of Laurel Street. The reason I'm asking is because in my research, one of the main reasons that communities initiate these kind of markets is, in fact, to help jumpstart various parts of the business district that could use a helping hand. And given the evolution with some of the things on the south end of Laurel Street, I'm not asking that we commit to that today. I'm just wondering whether you'd be open to considering that if we were able to address parking issues and whatnot.
Certainly, and we have looked at South Laurel. There are potential sites down in that area, but again, focusing on Laurel Street, 600 and 700 blocks for this particular purpose. Open to the conversation. I'm not,
Okay.
Certainly.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Ron?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something on the cleaning. So it's basically 8 times a year. Are we cleaning and the chamber is reimbursing us for that cleaning? Is that the way that you plan it?
Actually, yeah, that's how we've done in the past. It's happened infrequently, but we've done it that way in the past.
Okay, when you said chamber would be cleaning, I had visions of the board out there, with brooms and hoses and stuff.
Yeah, we'll do our part during the week-to-week part of the market, but on a regular, consistent basis, whether the city's doing it 4 times, the chamber's doing it 4 times, we've committed to do it at least 4 times. And reimbursing the city, they contract with someone, to come out and do it on whatever schedule it's on, and or increasing it if that's the case.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Any questions, Bob?
No.
I was just going to ask, Hard Harvest Nights, I think, traditionally started at the beginning of May, is that right?
Right.
And so we're shifting to June. Can you tell me why that is?
We're getting a little bit into the season right now. We have not notified our market vendors because we're waiting for a decision to move forward and the approval of the permit.
So it's just organizational. It doesn't have anything to do with construction downtown or anything like that?
No, it's just mainly getting all of our vendors in line and being able to start giving them enough window of time and us as well, to promote the market. Since we are moving to a new day, it's going to take quite an effort to promote it so that when we open, there's a decent crowd and people show up.
And then this is sort of a joint question for you and for Al. How are you intending to let the public know that, hey, the farmers market that's been at this time is now shifting to Sunday? What are the mechanisms that you're going to get the word out?
Well, we would do it all the electronic means, which mainly don't cause us to spend a lot of money on, but we are going to have to spend. We're going to have out-of-pocket money expenses for newspaper advertising. We're looking at doing a cross-street banner. There's a number of things that we would normally do on a Thursday market that we'll certainly do for starting up on a Sunday. We probably have to spend a little more time and money on getting the word out there.
Jeff or Al, are we planning to put this in the community newsletter or any kind of city-specific outreach?
Yeah, community events like this that we think of as kind of a quasi-partnership, we'd highlight through our various social media channels, as well as our newsletter, the online newsletters, as well as the hard copy, highlighting dates and things of that nature as they come up. And if the chamber develops flyers for this, we'd be happy to place them in our facilities so that people can see them.
We're not sure of the exact cost. We're hoping to do a mailer to every household. That's just one idea, but we're not sure if that's actually feasible at this point. And we buy ads in the Bay Area Parent and other publications.
Great. Ron, you had...
I was just thinking, what about just some posters in all the downtown business windows that?
Yeah, we've done that.
Should be a visual.
Oh yeah, we've done that, and we take them out to Redwood Shores and other areas as well. Yeah. So yeah, all these things that we do for the Thursday night market, we would continue to do for the Sunday market, but we know we're going to have to do even more. So that's to be determined.
All right. Great. Thank you very much. So I have quite a few public comment cards, so I'll ask you to come up and again ask you to respect the 2-minute time limit. My first speaker is Monette Meredith. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Monette Meredith, and I'm a resident of San Carlos. I also happen to be an employee of the Reading Bug, and I am an avid user of the Thursday nights. But I am concerned about having the farmers market every single Sunday. I went to work this past Sunday at 10:15. There was not a single parking space on Laurel Street. All the people who are dining for brunch at all the different restaurants. I am really concerned that when the Wheeler Plaza starts, that entire parking lot in the back is going to be gone, and that there is going to be no place for customers of the businesses who are open to park. Sunday happens to be the second busiest day of the week for the bookstore. We do birthday parties on the weekend, and it is a family time. People have brunch, they walk down the street, and we have learned from past history that having the farmers market does not bring extra business to the store. Sometimes you get extra foot traffic, but it brings no additional income to the store. So I'm concerned that, as wonderful as it would be to have the farmers market every week, that I'm not sure everybody's thinking about the impact on the businesses that do rely on that. And there are quite a few businesses that are open on Sundays. And so I don't think that the impact is going to be less than it is. And I think it's going to be even more for us on a Sunday.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rich Erhardt. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I speak in opposition to the resolution. I am a longtime member of San Carlos here since 1978, and we've been going to that market since, I believe, started early 90s, Dave?
94? No, 2004.
Thank you. And I decided to take a little petition, tell my friends about it, because they've been asking me the last couple months, hey, when's the farmers market start? It starts in May, ends in September. We, the undersigned, strongly oppose moving the farmers market harvest nights, which runs from 1600 to 2000 on Thursdays from May until September, to a daytime event running from 1000 to 1400. We patronize both the street vendors and established merchants buying such things as produce, specialty items, food, beverages, and meals. We especially like the concerts in Franks Park, where we can relax, enjoy the music, dance, and watch all the kids play. The crowd really gets fired up. A number of us come, I'm from San Carlos, but a number of us come from surrounding areas such as Portola Valley, Atherton, Los Altos Hills, Redwood City, Belmont, and Foster City to enjoy this unique downtown San Carlos event. Their towns don't have that. We all comment on how this is our favorite night of the week. For many of us, our children and grandchildren have grown up playing in the park while attending the market. We have a brick or two in that park that we gave from our family, and it says, the San Carlos exclamation mark. This place is special. My significant other and I at Christmas, we just got a picture. You know what the picture was? 8 of us adults and kids at the farmers market on Thursday night, listening to the concert. What happens to the concerts? A midday event could not come close to matching the ambience, charm, and special interactions of attendees, both young and old, in our little town of San Carlos. And I did a little walk around informal casual survey today, and I went to about 18 businesses. I honestly didn't know about this till we read about it in the little Daily Journal newspaper, and I think there was some 60 or 70 comments, and only 4 were opposed to moving it. Well, I talked to 18 businesses.
If I could ask you just to finish the thought.
Okay. 9 were for keeping it Thursday, 4 against, and 5 could go either way. And they said businesses already have Sunday customers. Parking already is full up on Sunday, plus there's unlimited parking on Laurel on Sunday. No one wants to work on Sunday as far as restaurants getting increased businesses. And traffic's heavier on Thursdays, but about Wheeler Plaza, they're worried more about that traffic all year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earnhardt. Our next speaker is Don Mancini. Good evening.
Good evening again. My name is Don Mancini. I am a past board chair of the San Carlos Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the Sunday Farmers Market. What I'd like to share is a personal experience. Last Sunday, my wife and I went to Campbell to have lunch, and we were surprised when we got there that they were having their Sunday Farmers Market. And every restaurant was full. The stores were all busy. The community was obviously having a great time, and it's kind of having my chamber hat not far from my back pocket. I started walking around and asking people. I talked to the people that own the restaurant that we ate in that day, and everybody just thinks that it's a huge ad for the community. And so I hope that you all see the same value in that for here in San Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Our next speaker is Susan Hanna. Good evening again.
So this time I'm wearing my San Carlos residence hat. Don, I must have run into you downtown Campbell because I went also and was absolutely delighted to see a farmer's market. You know, when the farmer's market happens, as it has in the past, I'm working. So for me, I'm hoping and looking forward to being able to come downtown on Sunday and enjoy my community as simply a resident and not down here to work. And so I'm looking forward to that. As far as my business goes, I kind of quietly polled a few other business owners early on when I started my business, and they said, oh, we go home Thursdays. We don't get any business on farmers market nights because their impression is that people are there to purchase from the farmer's market. And so it made for a really long day, but all these years, 5 years now, I've been open Thursday nights, and it's grueling for me. First of all, I can't have customers from noon on Thursday, so I lose half of my day. And I stay because just in case. But the truth of it is, when I went to Campbell, I saw some businesses that really interested me. And either I went into them or I said to my partner, let's go to Campbell. It's really cute. They've got a farmer's market. It's a Sunday. And lastly, I'm a vegan. So for me, having this year round means that I have access to what I really need to keep me going all week. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Our next speaker is Paula Aber-Moffat. Good evening.
I'll make this brief. As you know, I am a small business owner, but the reason I'm talking tonight is because I'm a parent. And we have been going to the farmer's market since my kids were in a stroller. And when I was thinking about what I'm going to talk about, I realized how much they've learned from the farmer's market. They didn't know what organic fruit was when they were toddlers, but as they've grown, we've experienced it and talked about it and why it's so important to eat healthy, as well as talking about our footprint in the world and how transporting these things from local farms is so important. Also, I've enjoyed it on Thursday nights, and I too will miss the music and the atmosphere, but I also find that I missed a lot of Thursday nights because as a working parent, and most of our community now is filled with working parents, Sunday's my day where I can run errands, and I really can see myself shopping at the farmer's market and spending a little more time in some of the businesses on Laurel that I don't have the chance to do on Thursday nights when we're trying to get home and get homework done or sporting activities. So as a parent, I think the shift to Sunday would really work well for my family, but I also talked to other families about it, and we're kind of like in a consensus that, and probably for those people with toddlers, they're going to still be wanting to rock out in front of the band in the park, and I understand that. But I think for our community, Sundays would work well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paula. Our next speaker is our former mayor, Tom Davids. Good evening, Tom.
Well, thanks for hearing all the comments both ways. I think one thing we can accept as we go forward is that there will be a lot of changes the next year or two. With Wheeler Plaza coming on, parking is going to change dramatically. We're talking about valet parking. With the Transit Village coming on at the same time, there's going to be even more changes. And I think we have an opportunity here to do something different and exciting. It's a one-year trial. It's not forever. It may turn out to be forever if we all like it. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We go back and do something else. But I see it as a great opportunity for the community to come together downtown, which is the heartbeat of the city, and be together at a different time and in a different place and doing different things. And the opportunity of doing something on more or less a regular basis in addition to the farmers market, I think is really exciting. I see things happening there that can be a lot of fun for everybody. And it's going to involve adjustment on all of our parts. But I see it as a good move forward. Going for a year is, I think, acceptable. And we at the chamber level would like to see it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our next speaker is Carol Bash. Good evening.
Good evening. I am too a small business owner in San Carlos. I have the Nothing Bundt Cake Store on Laurel Street, and I agree with the Sunday market. I believe it's going to be more of a family time, more of a community event. I think families do have difficulties getting there on Thursday nights. People are late from work, etc. I think on Sunday mornings we're going to have a lot more people walking to our farmers market. They'll go to the park, they'll go to a sporting event, and then they can easily walk downtown. Whereas if you're rushing at 5 or 6 on a Thursday night, you're probably more likely to have to park and find a place to be. So I think Sunday markets will be great for our business. People stroll by. It does bring people in. I stayed open late as well on Thursday nights, and it did help increase our business. So as Tom said, especially for a pilot program when all this other construction is going on, I think it would be very favorable for us to try this out and see how Sunday comes together for our market.
Thank you, Carol. Our next speaker is Jason Mansfield.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, council members. I'm Jason Mansfield. I'm a resident, but I'm also a chamber board member. And as Tom said, change is tough, isn't it? But our chamber has talked about this a lot, and that's what we want to do. For good reason, right? And I'm a professional engineer, so I like to have a basis for things when I make a decision. And I think you guys have talked about that earlier today on another matter. A couple of board members have also been on the general plan update committee, as I was. And so there's a basis there. Goal number 2 of the land use element says, preserve and strengthen downtown as a civic, cultural, and social heart of the city. And there's a bunch of policies and actions that support it. But action number 2.5, work with the Chamber of Commerce and other business organizations to enhance the success of downtown businesses. So, trust the chamber. We've talked about it. We've thought of this would be a good idea. We've supported the art and wine fair. I think we can all agree the chamber does some good things. So don't just trust us, but rely on general plan and some basis for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. My last speaker card is the president of our chamber, Dominic Churchillo. Good evening.
Thank you for your time, Mayor Johnson, members of the City Council. As the president of the Chamber, I'd like to express the Chamber's strong support for moving the farmers market to Sunday and making it year-round. Hot Harvest Nights have been very successful for the last 12 years, bringing business to downtown, creating a fun atmosphere on Thursday evenings. And it's time to build on that success and expand the length of the farmers market and make it year-round. This will help grow the number of people who come to our downtown and to strengthen our community. We recently finished the Week of the Family in San Carlos, a time to pause from our busy lives and to reflect and spend more time with family. Given the success of this program is clearly something valued in this community. Moving the market to Sundays will allow it to be more of a family activity. A recent survey of business community by the Chamber of Commerce showed a vast majority of the downtown businesses would prefer Sunday farmers market. In short, a Sunday year-round farmers market will be better for business. Given the coming disruptions to the downtown area with multiple development projects beginning, a Sunday market will have less impact on the parking and reduce the impact to residents and businesses alike. I hope you will support and request to move the farmers market to Sunday and make it a year-round event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. I have no other speaker cards. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Please come up, introduce yourself, and you can fill out a speaker card afterwards. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Enzo Rosano. I'm a small business owner, and I think I'd like to move the farmers market on Sunday would be a great idea. And I love the idea because I remember, I've been downtown for the past 5-6 years, and the farmers market on Thursday, it was fantastic. I had a lot of friends that came to visit us from Palo Alto, Los Altos, Mountain View, which in the past, I would say, couple of years was a little different because of this traffic. The traffic in the Bay Area has become tremendous for the past couple of years. And sometimes I will call my friend and say, hey, you guys come tonight, farmers market? They're like, forget about it. You cannot drive on the freeway. So for me, I love the idea to show our friend from the North Bay, the South Bay, to come downtown San Carlos to see our beautiful little town. And also, I love the idea to have the farmers market all year round. I think it's great every Sunday to have an event, which can be anything. I also like the idea to move a little bit in the 600 block, to have opportunity like my business, Shelby Garden, other business to get a big exposure. And then, even maybe one day, as Mr. Mark said, to move to South Laurel. It would be beautiful, for all Laurel Street to take advantage of this amazing event. And what I hope, I wish I can see, we put all the energy, everybody, to make a beautiful event, as was the Thursday Farmers Market, to create something special on Sunday market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? If not, I will.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt Resolution 2016-25, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing staff to issue a special event permit for a year-round farmers market on Sundays in downtown San Carlos for a one-year pilot period.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Did you put your light on? Ron, did you wish to say anything?
Yeah, I just
want
to say a couple words. First of all, I want to thank all the chamber members for coming out and many members of the public who came out tonight. We've always been a city of innovation and trying new things. Sometimes we get credit for those things, sometimes we don't. I think, though, I would rather have people mad at me for something that I tried rather than mad at me for something that I didn't try, because you never know what'll work out. I love the Thursday farmers market. Somebody said, I think it was Paula, sometimes you just can't get there. I work in Redwood City, and I think I want to get down there. But it would be 5 o'clock, 5:30. I'd be working. I wouldn't get home. And something else will come up. But my wife and I walk downtown every Sunday for coffee. I think this is a great experiment, and I'm looking forward to it, so I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Ron. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo some of Ron's comments as well. I think that this is a worthwhile experiment to try. I think that I appreciate the feedback from folks who raised concerns about the shift to Sunday from Thursday evening. I think the reality is, in something as big and impactful as this, there is no perfect day or a perfect location. But I think that this shift, particularly with some of the additional things the Chamber has said that they're willing to undertake, which I really appreciate, is, I think, a reasonable experiment to try. So I look forward to seeing how this works, and hopefully I won't forget, and I'll remember to come down Sundays as opposed to Thursday evenings.
Thank you, Mark. Bob?
I wasn't on council in 2004, but I do remember there was a great deal of discussion whether we should ever have a farmer's market or have anything closing a street on Laurel. This is the same kind of conversation. I think it's worked out over the last 12 years. I think it's been a big success, and I think it's a good idea to try something different, and we're going to try something different. So I'm going to vote for this.
Thanks, Bob. I, too, am going to support this. I really, echoing what Ron said, I appreciate all the Chamber Board members coming out on a Monday evening. Want you to know that, the council is, concerned about parking shortages, construction, and we want to be a partner in this over the next year to make sure that it works as best possible for everyone. But I do think it makes a lot of sense to shift the market from a time when we already have a busy downtown on a Thursday night to a time when there's a lot more available parking. And I know as a busy parent, like Paula said, it's going to work a lot better for my family and a lot of other families I know. I do want to say, I am very sensitive to the concerns from some small businesses that this will be impacted. I think some of the motivation for this change was businesses having some concerns about the Thursday night market, and I want to make sure that we're not just shifting the burden from one set of businesses to another. So I really want to hold you to the commitment that you're going to work with local businesses, that you're going to be sensitive, that you're going to hear from them, that you're going to try to address their issues. And when you come back and talk about this in a year, I really want to hear whether those concerns were addressed and how it went. So lastly, I appreciate your willingness to clean the streets a little bit more. I think that's going to have a big positive impact. So thanks for your flexibility. And with that, Crystal, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes. Thank you very much. Do you guys want to proceed to the next item, or you want to take a couple-minute recess?
I'd like to visit the restaurant.
All right. Why don't we take a 3-minute recess? Let folks adjourn. We'll be back at 9:13.
We want to coordinate and also do our own thing. Kind of like
Hello. Yep, the 14th then.
Wheeler Plaza development, public parking, and construction, in consideration of adopting a resolution appropriating $100,000 to the Economic Development Professional Services account. Mr. Savay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Before I begin, I'd like to make some introductions. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Wheeler Plaza public parking and the strategy on what to do during construction, and also an overall construction communication update and what are we going to do and how are we going to communicate with folks in town. But before I begin that, I wanted to note that there's a number of people here in the audience that could potentially answer questions or assist me in answering questions. We have John McMorrow with Silverstone Communities, Lisa Costa-Sanders, our principal planner, Dolores Montenegro, who is a project manager with Kitchell Construction. She's working for us now on the construction and communication side. We have Laura Tuchel, who is a PR manager for KB Homes, and we have Dan Huertas and Jeff McMullen from KB Homes. So we may call on those individuals if need be. So moving forward, what are the desired outcomes of our strategy and moving forward as we go into construction with the Wheeler Plaza project? What are our general desired outcomes? And that would be convenient, free public parking. We'd like to limit disruption to businesses. We all know that there's going to be some disruption to our community for a certain period of time. It won't last forever. Acceptable valet wait times, so we will talk about valet and how that'll work. Good wayfinding. We need to get people in and out of the downtown a little better than we do today. And effective ongoing communication, and then rapid adjustment to challenges that may arise. So how are we going to do this on the parking side? So I'm going to start and I'm going to focus on parking for a while before I get to construction communication. So in terms of the parking strategy side, what are we going to do? How are we going to approach this? Well, we've always been a collaborative community and a collaborative city, and we believe that this collaboration will be key moving forward. So what we've done is we've started a Wheeler Plaza parking task force that will be working with our council subcommittee for parking. We have a PR and communications team, as I mentioned, Dolores and Laura, and we have our merchants and our public, and we'll be working closely with everybody on this public parking issue moving forward. Who is the Wheeler Plaza Parking Task Force? It's a group, working group, made up of KB Homes. We will have a valet company, Silverstone Community City staff. The contractors are very important as the process moves forward. County Sheriff, and PR consultants, and of course Samtrans. So that's just the task force group that is meeting to strategize. And again, we're going to be talking to everybody. In terms of a timeline, now one of the key things is to note that the construction of the parking structure will be about 12 to 14 months. At the end of the 12 to 14 month construction period, it will be open to the public. So the worst of it will be in this 12 to 14 month period once construction begins. And how do we handle the parking in that period of time? So as you see from the timeline, in February, this is the first of a number of council communications that we will do before the City Council. We're intending to close escrow sometime in March. We are going to have a downtown merchant meeting to meet with the merchants. We've already met with a number of groups like the Government Affairs Council and others, and other groups in the downtown. In April, some utility work could begin. It's called Rule 20A work, where they take the wires and they begin the process of undergrounding those wires. But that doesn't require shutting down of the parking area. It may be slightly disruptive, but that can move forward. Then we'll do another council presentation toward the end of April, and then valet would open prior to building, demo, and grading for the main project area. we would have to do something about the Foodville building, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So we will have to prepare the Foodville building area for the valet parking. But I think it's really one of the key mantras I think that we should remember is that nothing will happen until we have a plan in place. That's critical. So I know that there's a good deal of nervousness on everybody's behalf, but we're not going to move forward until we have a plan that we think is going to work in place. Wheeler Plaza parking site. This is a bird's eye view of the site there is on the screen, as you can see. And so let's see if this works. There we go. So between Walnut Street, San Carlos Avenue, and Laurel Street. So that's where the main body of the Wheeler Plaza development will be. And it's also, as a side note, it's important to note that a number of these businesses are no longer in business. And a number of these businesses, as noted earlier this evening, these are all being remodeled. So there's 8 or so businesses that will be closed during this process and will be under construction concurrently with the Wheeler Plaza development. And the one sort of positive out of that is it will lessen the impact on parking at Wheeler Plaza to some extent. This is taking a closer look at downtown parking. So here's the general idea of how we will approach parking for during construction of Wheeler Plaza. What we would do first is we would knock down the Foodville building, which is owned by the city. So that would, and prepare that site. We would surface it, stripe it, and that would be the key valet location. So that'll be the primary access point for the public and clients, downtown merchants and such. And then we would use free public parking over at the Samtrans building. So hopefully you got the letter from Samtrans that agreed to lease the building, the entire parking structure, for purposes of public parking. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works. But that would be the key site for valet. So you'd drop your keys off here, you'd walk downtown and shop, and then the valets would take your car here, or there would be a number of parking spaces located here. There would also all these other public parking areas would continue to be open, and this just kind of shows what's going on across the way with the Transit Village and Transit Center. In terms of the plan itself, what we're talking about now is having 3-hour valet parking for the public. Currently at Wheeler Plaza, it's 2 hours, so we want to add a little extra time for the inconvenience of doing the valet parking and to get the valet folks across to and from the main area there at Samtrans. There would still be all-day parking, permit parking, so we would still issue the parking permits for the number of spaces that are at Wheeler Plaza. And so those would still be available to employees to park all day over at the Samtrans building. One of the things that we still need to work out is how are we going to deal with construction parking. One option would be to use the railroad area south of Arroyo for that parking. And Samtrans has agreed to allow a lease of that area if necessary. Some other ideas would be to use some of the area in front of, on San Carlos Avenue in front of the Wheeler development. So this shows you bird's eye view of a couple of things. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the Foodville site. So that's what it would look like when it's all striped. There would be about 54 parking spaces located there. The alley would remain. You would access your valet there. Then there would be a number of parking spaces over at the Samtrans building. Now, in terms of demand, we know that Wheeler Plaza has 187 parking spaces, and at Foodville, 54 spaces, and we figure that we'll get about 200 parking spaces over at Samtrans. Now, it's important to note that the building is actually about 300 parking spaces, and Samtrans has agreed to allow usage of the entire building for parking. However, a number of those spaces, maybe 25 spaces, are for carpool vehicles, and we need to accommodate the Samtrans staff. And there's board meetings and such. So we're reducing that number to be conservative to note Samtrans usage. So we should have an excess capacity of parking over what we what we have at Wheeler in the Samtrans building. As noted, some potential extra spaces. Again, it's potentially, if we need to use that area south of Arroyo, between Britain and Arroyo, you could have your construction workers park down there and be shuttled into the site. So that's one option. There are a number of issues that we still need to resolve, and this is what we'll be doing with the parking council parking subcommittee, the working task force that we have. But what is an appropriate wait time for valet customers? And I was in the city over a couple of weeks back with my family, staying in the city. We used valet at a hotel that we were staying at. And I'd say the most we waited was about 10 minutes, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, we were looking around at things and talking to people, so the time went pretty quickly. Location and management of construction personnel parking. How do we accommodate Samtrans related parking? There's board meetings. They're very concerned that their board members on those days get their parking spaces. We need to develop some kind of a good wayfinding program, temporary wayfinding program and signage. And structural analysis of the garage. Now, those 200 spaces do not include additional parking spaces that we could potentially get in the alley, in the circulation areas. So it could be that, how valet people use buildings or parking lots, they can stack vehicles very tightly. Samtrans has asked if we're going to do that, then we need to have a structural analysis done, and the developer is going to pay for that and get that done. We'd like to also conduct some additional parking counts in the Samtrans garage to make sure we know exactly what we're dealing with. Although some counts have already been done, we'd like to get more up-to-date information. So that's the parking side of it. That's the basic concept and strategy for how we are going to park people during construction. The other part of this is how are we going to communicate with our community, with our stakeholders, with the merchants during the construction process. As I noted earlier, we have Wheeler, we have the Transit Village. There's a lot of mixed-use developments, really an unprecedented time for the city of San Carlos in terms of construction. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to do it? Public input is critical, and what we've done is we've set up a communication strategy that includes city staff, but we thought that it would be very important to have a liaison that knew how to talk to contractors, knew the construction process, and also had a way with talking with the public and merchants. And we contracted with Kitchell Construction and in particular Dolores Montenegro. She's already been working for the city for a couple of months now, and she's been doing a fantastic job solving some of the problems we have with the existing construction in our downtown, some of the issues. Laura Tuchel has been hired by KB Homes to be a liaison to merchants and businesses in the downtown. How are we going to get the word out? Well, and I think the council asked that question earlier about the farmers market. There's lots of ways that we intend to get the information out. Meetings, e-notify, social media. We're going to do TV program, city newsletter, public forums, and work with the construction workers. One of the other things that we did recently is we set up a new web page for the city. And so basically what this will do is allow the community to access the web page and go to any of these construction sites and click on the construction site and see what's happening. So it'll bring up some basic information about what kind of what the project is, and then it'll link you back to a page where you can learn more details about the project and what's happening. So that's set up. We'd like to further detail this, and that's one of the reasons that we're asking for additional funding from the council this evening. Public information, what does it look like? There's a spotlight on San Carlos that we're working on for the very near future. We will have regular construction updates that will go out to the community, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen, some flyers. How to learn more, there's a number of different ways. Again, getting the information out there is important, but also how do people feed back to our communications team and to the city. So there's going to be lots of different ways that you'll be able to talk to us and get answers to your questions or help us solve problems. So our communications team includes Lisa Costa-Sanders. Again, Dolores is really our key point person for problems that arise during the construction process with all construction in our community. And Laura Tuchel, public relations for KB Homes. And so that concludes this part of the presentation. And we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Al. Questions for Al? Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. Al, you mentioned about leasing the Samtrans building and possibly leasing property across the El Camino. Is the city paying for that?
No, that would be the developer. So the developer is actually required to do all this and to do the lease and to pay for all that stuff. So that's part of the development agreement.
Okay. You talked about the permit parking in Wheeler Plaza, that the folks will be parking in Samtrans. What about the permit parking at South Plaza?
That would all remain as it is now. Okay. So nothing would change in any of those other plazas.
Okay, thank you. And could someone self-park in the Samtrans building?
We're talking about that, and we don't have an answer for you yet, but we'll try and work that out.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor, at least for the moment.
Thanks, Bob. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Al. Good presentation. And welcome aboard, everybody working on this. It's always great to be wanted, and you're going to be very much wanted on this. Let me start out with just a question, which sort of a basic question. Since we're talking about valet parking, and I've certainly used valets many times in my life, but we're switching from self-park to valet park for a lot of people. Are the accident rates for valet parking comparable or better than what you would find just people driving in and out of a parking lot, or is there an exposure there?
Don't have an answer, but we'll log that one in and get you an answer for that question.
That would be great. I appreciate that. This next one, I mentioned one element of it to Jeff earlier today, but let me just mention to everybody here that I hope that part of our communications outreach plan, more broadly than just parking, is going to be selling the value proposition to the community of this, because obviously it's going to have a very big negative impact on people, even when everything's going correctly. I'm thinking along the lines of sort of reminding folks what they're getting for this. At the very least, they're getting a whole bunch of new parking spaces, and that's a chronic problem in San Carlos. I'd like to make sure everybody in San Carlos knows that that's what we're getting, so when they see the dust and the disruption and stuff, they're like, yes, okay, but I know I'm getting something for it. Just as a general comment, I really appreciate this update. I love the timeline where we're going to get additional updates and stuff. And this next thing, I would like people to take as simply as constructive criticism. I'm glad we're finally having this discussion. It's late in February, so I take great comfort from the notion of nothing's going to happen until you guys are satisfied with the plan. But I personally wish we were a little further along, and I would encourage people to, drive through and get this done. With the team we have in place, Al, is there a particular contact if a citizen has a problem, they run into a problem on a given day? Who do they call?
I think the best person to call would be Dolores. Okay. And we've already utilized Dolores to a great extent, and our citizens have been very satisfied with the work that she's been doing.
And you're planning on setting up some kind of hotline type system, or meaning that they don't have to know who to call, they just call a number or send an email in and it goes to Dolores?
There's a number of different ways we can get the information to Dolores. Either they can contact her directly from something they see in one of these flyers or information, or Access San Carlos, that kind of thing. So there will be a number of different ways to get the information to Dolores.
Okay. Yeah. I like that, because I think different people are going to remember different ways to report problems, so we need to have multiple ways to do that. One minor thing, when you were showing the reconstruction of the valet parking lot where Foodville used to be, I don't know whether they're supposed to or not, but I still see customers for Blue Line Pizza coming in through that alleyway to pick up pizzas. Are we going to manage that somehow, or because that's going to be one of your primary entrances to get into that of the valet system, correct?
That happened organically. It wasn't a permitted thing. We've talked to Blue Line Pizza about that. So that would no longer be permitted.
And I guess we will have staff there most of the time, valet staff, so if there is a problem, they will report it that it needs to be fixed. There's always the enforcement side of this stuff, too.
Yes.
Okay. Just one last question. I'm really happy to see that Samtrans has signed the leases and been very flexible about providing us with fallback plans for additional parking space. And I don't know if they have anybody here tonight, but I want to thank them for that. That's great. I had always heard over the years that, I guess unofficially, they had sort of allowed or encouraged Caltrain customers to park in the Samtrans lot and access the trains. So what that means is I presume there's a demand for the parking spaces in that structure that have nothing to do with Samtrans. They have to do with people riding the trains. Has that been factored into the usage thing, so we know that we have enough space there to actually park the number of cars we need to?
Yes, we realize that some commuters are going to want to park in that structure, so we will be taking that into consideration as part of this.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have really just one question for the moment. These construction updates, they're going to be mailed out, I assume?
Yeah, I mean, we'll do, we'll email them. There's e-notify, there's social media, Facebook. We'll mail some of them to the downtown merchants. So we'll use lots of different venues to get it out to people.
Do we have the ability on the freeway billboard to put up an occasional ad that says, got questions about the construction, go to the webpage, that type of thing?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Yeah, all right. I just want to make sure we get all the outreach possible. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Hey, Al. I'm going to echo Mark's concerns about the progress on the parking plan, and maybe put an exclamation point on it. I'm a bit concerned that we don't have the Samtrans stuff in writing, and so maybe just to be blunt about it, when are we going to get it in writing?
Well, we have an agreement in writing. I don't know if you saw that. Did you get a copy of that?
I saw the letter.
Yeah, so we have the letter.
As I read through it, there were a whole bunch of stipulations and a whole bunch of things, and I don't know if the city agrees to everything and they can kick us out 90 days notice and et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't see a final there.
There aren't any final, and you note the date on the letter, so that's part of the issue with regard to getting things done. But the good news is your board is in agreement to allow this to happen. Now, these agreements would be with the developer. The developer is required to do this as per the development agreement, but we want to make sure this happens and it happens correctly too. So we're helping with the process.
When do you think it's going to be done?
Well, as quickly as possible. We need to get we'll probably have the structural done in a few weeks, so I'd say a few weeks from now. Hopefully a lease agreement would be in place. That would be the best case scenario.
And are you planning to bring that back to us?
We don't need to, but yes, we would report it to you, of course. You wouldn't be ratifying something between Samtrans and the developer.
And I know you continually say it's looking good and all that, but what's the backup plan if it doesn't happen?
If that doesn't happen, well, we're going to have to look for other places in the downtown.
So I just want to emphasize that we need something in writing.
Yes.
And it's been, we've been talking about it for a long time. And these agencies move slow. There's lots of things. So if you say it's going to be a couple of weeks, I really want to hold you to that. And I know that it's out of your control, but if there are things that I can personally do, or if there are other things that you need to get an agreement, I'm concerned with the lack of specificity at the relatively late date. And I just want to make sure that we're going forward with a clear plan. I was hoping that we would have the parking plan tonight. And I know the staff report said, well, we'll get to the parking plan. And this this is, I think, how things can go badly if there's a lot of vagueness and a lot of hope and a lot of things, and then something happens at the last minute. So I really, really want to push you to do that.
You bet. I'll let you know if we could use your assistance.
Okay. I was hoping, Dolores, if you wouldn't mind coming up, so I could ask you a question or two.
Did I one other thing?
Yeah, sure. So welcome to the team. We're very happy you're here. I just wanted to hear what you're getting involved in the project. You've been taking a look at it. How would you assess it at this point, and what kind of concerns or open questions do you have?
I think the concerns that the mayor and council have expressed are spot on with the things that I perceive or will be some of the key issues that will plague us regardless of how much good we do, quite frankly. I think city staff has done a phenomenal job to this point in time in identifying the opportunities that there are for bringing together the right team players to the table to address these issues. And I think the constituency of this great city will also see the value in all of the efforts that will come to bear here pretty quickly. The developer as well has really stepped up to the plate in terms of what they're willing to do to help mitigate the concerns. And I think it's, incumbent upon all of us to do our own due diligence and ensure that communication, which is going to be key to this entire endeavor, is maintained with the constituency. Barring any other unforeseen, unaddressed types of considerations, those are the things that I would see as the single most, relevant components that would need to be addressed right up front. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been done. I think we continue to work on it. If I could just say one other thing is, and that is, we need to maintain a level of flexibility within our own efforts to identify other opportunities in the event. I think you brought up the request, what's the backup plan if this doesn't work? Well, I think that's incumbent upon all of us to address, what other opportunities may exist. And certainly, we've started to throw around a few ideas behind closed doors. And I think before they come forward to yourself and the constituency, they need to be fully vetted behind those closed doors. So everyone is in agreement so that when the communication comes back to the public, that communication is consistent across the board and everyone's bought into it. And I think with relative assurance, you have my commitment that there will be no issue that goes unaddressed.
Excellent. Well, I'm very happy to hear that. I want to do, and I think hopefully I speak for the council here, that we want to do everything we can to make you successful. You're going to have my cell phone number. I want to have your cell phone number.
Absolutely.
I've said this to Jeff, and I truly believe this. If we do a great job with Wheeler Plaza this year, and the community says, hey, that was a huge construction project and it went really smoothly, it'll be a win. The year will be a win, even if we do nothing else. If we totally screw this up, there's nothing that we can do. It will be a loss. And so I really want focus and attention, and I want you to be successful, and I want, the city to be successful, and I want us to prove to ourselves and to the community that we can do these kinds of big projects in a way that works well. So welcome aboard. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I just want you to know and hear it straight from me that that this is really crucial to our success this year. And I want to do everything we can to make you successful. So
thank you. I firmly believe that the city of San Carlos is very rapidly positioning itself not to just be the city of good living, but to be the city of great living.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. Thank you very much, Bob. Did you have another question?
I sort of misread this one line in the staff report, and I think now that I've read it 19 times more about valet parking in the evenings. There could be some evenings that there aren't enough, but my history going downtown is there's more than 54 spots taken up by 6:30, 7:30. Now, they dissipate pretty quickly on a weeknight, but I was misreading this. I was thinking that it was almost automatic, and that's not the way the sentence reads as I read it the third or fourth time. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're not going to assume that people aren't going to come down in the evenings and have more than 54 spots. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Mark, did you have some follow-up questions?
Yes. Actually, probably more of a comment than a question, but I'll do it anyway. I've had conversations, as I'm sure we all have, with Jeff on a number of occasions about this, and I will say that preparatory to me asking him a question, I take great comfort from the fact that Jeff has told me that nothing's going to happen here until he's satisfied that it's going to work smoothly. And I want you to know, Jeff, that you have my complete support. If you need to keep this thing halted for whatever time you think is necessary, I don't really care. And I say that not because I'm trying to harm the interests of the developers or everybody else. It's just that it is really important that things work out correctly. And here's the question, put you on the spot. I would like to hear from you about your commitment to making sure that this is going to work smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the council and the staff had the opportunity to talk, for many, many months now, many years really, but in the last several months really focusing on the issue around construction and parking in the downtown. Council's been very clear in communicating their expectations and desired outcomes here. That's really all we can ask of you guys and our leaders, and we really appreciate the commitment that we've got from the council. We're asking for some money tonight to do some of this work. If I get the sense that a little more money 6 or 8 months from now would help accomplish what it is the council wants to accomplish here, I won't be shy about asking for it. Our desire here is to absolutely minimize, to the best of our ability, the impact of construction on both the residents who use the downtown and the merchants who are doing business downtown. We need to manage our expectations. It is a big construction project. There are going to be impacts that are unavoidable and days where there's louder construction or lots of cement trucks coming in, and there's going to be lots of days, particularly towards the tail end of that construction, where the construction becomes more and more internal and less visible on the site. We've got the commitment built right in that getting that parking garage up and operational is the #1 priority from a construction standpoint. And we're looking forward to working with Silverstone, KB Homes as a real partner to solve any of these issues that come up. We're not a city, we're not a staff that are simply going to point to the developer and say, that's all your problem. We want to jump in to solve the problem rather than point fingers. I know that's the council's approach to how they run the city, and that's certainly going to be how we're approach this subject as well. So I will say it on the record, until we get a parking plan and all the communication issues are fully addressed to our satisfaction, and we'll go through the subcommittee and back to the council, we won't be taking the Wheeler Parking Plaza out of operation. So.
All right, thank you, Mark. Any further questions? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, make a...
one person. Oh, pardon me. Please come up. Yep. And please introduce yourself.
Earlier, I'm Monette Meredith. I just have a quick question with all the valet. What is going to be done for people who just, like I bank at Wells Fargo, and I just want to go to the ATM machine? So am I going to have to do a 25-minute valet park in order to get money out of the ATM from Wells Fargo? Or you're going to pick up food? It's not the long shopping trip where I don't mind valet parking my car. It's the people who live in town and we run downtown to do a quick errand. And I think those are the things that we're going to go elsewhere because it's going to be impossible to do those things.
Thank you.
No, I was going to say I had an answer. South Plaza is a great opportunity. It doesn't take 25 minutes to walk there. Or hopefully you'll come at a time when you can park in that parking lot where Foodville is. That's the ideal thing. But if it doesn't happen that way, there's no other way around it. It's going to be difficult. And having had some experience in building houses for 27 years, large developments, Murphy will show up. The trick is how much Murphy shows up relative to what we're doing. There's going to be times that people are going to scream and yell, and this lady here, perfect example. And we're going to get lots of calls like that. It's how we manage it and how we do it, but it's going to happen. Don't think that it's as good a parking plan, as good a thing as we do. It's going to be hard. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. But can I make a motion, Mr. Mayor?
Please do.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to move to adopt Resolution 2016-26, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos appropriating $100,000 to the Economic Development Professional Services account and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for professional services with Kitchell Construction in an amount not to exceed $150,000 for project management services.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, just one question. I want to make sure that all of us on the council get an email that has all the contact numbers on it, because we're going to get calls. So I'm going to save that email, and when somebody calls me or emails me, I want to be able to say, call Dolores, or call Laura, or call somebody.
Well, gee, Ron, who's on the parking subcommittee?
Not me.
I am.
Or call Cameron.
Call the mayor.
Call the mayor.
He'll park a car.
Call the mayor.
Okay.
All right,
Any further discussion? Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Vasili?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes. All right. With that, we'll move on to item 8C, consideration of introducing an ordinance amending chapters of the municipal code, increasing parking time limit on the west side of El Camino Real, south of Holly Street, to the Redwood city limits from 1 hour to 2 hours. Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Jay Walter, Public Works Director. We have for you tonight an ordinance, and to give you a little bit of background, as the South Walnut area and the downtown parking issues have surfaced, one of the things that's been talked about is what's really going on with the available parking supply in and around the downtown. And so amongst our discussion, and after the parking consultant had done his occupancy studies and taking a look in and around the downtown, it was discovered that along the El Camino Real, the west side particularly, that area is all currently set at 1 hour time limit parking. And as the council is aware, the majority of the streets in and around the downtown, Laurel Street particularly, and then the side streets that connect from El Camino up to approximately Walnut Street and a little further in a couple locations, those parking areas are all 2 hour time limit parking. So one of the questions came up, well, how much is the 1 hour parking along El Camino being utilized? And according to the parking consultant's survey, those spaces were being utilized at best about 20% of the time. So it at least pointed out a potential for considering a change in that parking time limit, because as we know in the downtown, many of the errands and visits to the downtown would last a little more than an hour, especially around lunchtime. You typically would be there probably an hour and a half or maybe a little longer, so a 2 hour parking time limit is actually sized quite well for that. And that is what a lot of our business is during the middle of the day. So, as it were, the suggestion was made to consider a change to from the 1 hour parking to the 2 hour parking. And we set out to get some input and feedback from the Transportation and Circulation Commission at the regularly scheduled meeting last week. Unfortunately, at the last moment, we had a cancellation from one of our members, and so that dropped us down below 3 available for that meeting, so we had to cancel the meeting at the time. We had sent out the notification to the business owners along El Camino for that meeting and had anticipated that they would be interested in wanting to talk about that. And so we went ahead and we sent out those notifications for this meeting, knowing that the council would be considering this item. So unfortunately, we didn't get that TNC feedback that we had hoped for, but I know at least one business owner showed up that night, braving the driving rain that we had on Thursday night, and I was able to talk to her and tell her the council would be considering this tonight. So again, on the screen you have the El Camino that's shown in the map, with the purple being the 1 hour time limit, and then the blue lines on Laurel and the side streets being the 2 hour time limit. So again, the reason for the change: there are potentially 275 spaces on the west side of El Camino that could be added to the inventory of 2 hour parking. So that's a pretty significant increase. Doesn't mean all of them would be, because at some point the businesses along El Camino, some of them are drop in quickly, take care of business and leave, and so there might be a need to have some shorter term parking spaces. And we have accommodated that at certain locations in the downtown as well. So that's something that can be considered for a portion of those spaces. But again, as I mentioned, the parking consultant's information indicated that those were less than 20% occupied, and a 2 hour time limit for the downtown visits is a pretty good kind of measure of how people are conducting their business in the downtown. So the discussion about changing this, this was considered to be an incremental change, something that could be done sooner, while the other larger initiatives of the downtown parking plan, especially in the South Walnut area, like trying to get additional land for parking garage, or leasing space from Samtrans for some potential employee parking, or even considering residential parking permit for the South Walnut area. Those are ones that are going to take more time. This was one that we could bring to the council for some discussion fairly early. See if I missed that, sorry. No, we're good there. So tonight the recommendation is to introduce the ordinance to amend the chapters that show our time-limited parking, and this would increase the parking time limit on the west side of El Camino from Holly Street to the Redwood city limits from 1 hour to 2 hours. So at this point I could take questions from the council.
Thanks, Jay. Questions for Jay?
Just one comment. My friend Scooter, who used to be an owner of the Lighthouse, used to ask me, when are you going to change it to 2 hours? Unfortunately, he's retired now, but I was thinking of finding him and saying, well, we finally got around to it, Scooter. But anyway, thank you.
Bob, did you have any questions? No. I'll just ask Jay, are you aware of any opposition?
No opposition, but the business owner that I talked to last Thursday night was very concerned that that parking would, along El Camino, would be taken up for a good portion of the day, and it would have a limiting factor on the kind of drop-in, quick do business at some of the locations along El Camino.
I see. So there's potential concern about quick turnover for people just running in and out.
That's what I understand, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, pardon. Is there any public comment?
Oh.
Mr. Girlstone?
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening again.
I will fill out a card if you so desire. I'm Les Girdlestone. I thought I'd hang around for this. I own 2 buildings on the 600 block of El Camino. Where the Keller Williams building is the big one, the next 2 buildings south, I'm the owner of those 2 buildings. And the 3rd building down, my father owns that building. So we own 3 buildings in a row on the El Camino. We are not opposed to the 2 hour parking. And I say kind of facetiously, you may be surprised, but my tenants are extremely concerned about the parking with Wheeler Plaza and Transit Village, because they are between both. The sheriff has bigger things to do than enforce parking. But since Keller Williams moved in, parking on the 600 block has been a first-class pain in the rear. If that is not monitored and those wheels are not chalked, those people stay there from 8 in the morning to whenever they want to leave. I'm not making it a priority for the sheriff, but during the construction of the two other going on, if we get a little emphasis in there, it would be greatly appreciated. Other than that, we have no opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bob, did you want to make, I saw you reaching for your button, Bob. Did you want to make any more comments on? No, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to introduce ordinance number
1503.
1503, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Carlos amending chapters 10.32.200 and 10.32.210, increasing the parking time limit on the west side of El Camino Real south of Holly Street to the Redwood city limits from 1 hour to 2 hours.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Crystal, please call the roll.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Basili?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes. And now we will move on to item 8E, consideration of adopting a resolution establishing a policy for recovery of attorneys' fees and costs. Presumably that is Mr. Rubens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Tonight you have before you a proposed policy that would, in essence, change our current process, which is a case-by-case review of matters that the city might be able to recover attorneys' fees and costs after litigation, to a default that would authorize or require me to seek those fees unless the council decides that they don't want me to seek those fees. And this arose out of some recent cases that the city had that the issue of whether or not the city was entitled to fees and costs came up, and it was definitely a case where there were a case that potentially a strong argument could be made that the case itself was frivolous, therefore entitling the city to attorney's fees. And one of the reasons for the policy would enable me, when assessing cases at an early stage, to be able to point to potential litigants if I felt that their case lacked merit or was frivolous, that I could say, just be aware that the policy direction that I have from the City Council is that the city always pursues fees and costs in such cases at the conclusion, and it might have the potential for a deterrent effect, or at least make people think twice about initiating litigation when I've told them in writing, which I would do, that I believe their case is meritless or frivolous. And one of the recent cases, at least, I actually did that, and we decided for a lot of policy reasons not to pursue those fees. But this would be a change in policy. It's pretty simple. The resolution has language that, and basically it enables me to make an assessment. There has to be some ability for me to review the facts of the case. And if there's any question, I would of course come to the council whether or not you wanted to make an exception to the rule. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions, or if you have any questions about the proposed resolution, I'd be glad to answer that.
Questions for Greg? Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Greg, the only question I really have here is that, for my taste, the resolution as worded doesn't actually go far enough. I appreciate what you said about this is a change, but actually, to me, it's not much of a change, because it was, the very last paragraph of it, it says, it establishes a policy to enable the city attorney to seek recovery of fees and costs, et cetera, et cetera. I believe you actually have the ability to do that today. I don't know that in that sense that we're actually enabling anything. For my taste, what I would actually rather do is to basically make it the default option that the city would seek to recover such costs when they were allowed under the law, perhaps subject to council override to say, no, we don't want to do it in this particular case, but the default would be, yes, we're going to do it. So I appreciate your feedback on that.
Well, I see the word that says enable. I mean, that's definitely a word that could be changed to authorize or direct or something, depending on how strong you want to be. But I think
I like direct.
And direct would be that I have the unless I get different direction, I will seek fees. But I just want to make it clear that it has to be a case where I think it's justified under the law. So with that caveat, direct is an appropriate substitute word for enable that's in the current resolution before you.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind when I make the motion.
Thanks, Mark. Other questions for Greg? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move to adopt Resolution 2016-27, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos establishing a policy for recovery of attorney's fees and costs, with the caveat that in the last paragraph of, sorry, my screen just turned off, of the resolution that we change the wording, hereby establishes a policy to enable the city attorney to seek recovery of fees and costs, to read, hereby establishes a policy to direct the city attorney to seek recovery of fees and costs.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I will just say, since this is the kind of item that I suspect someday somebody will review the tape of the meeting to understand what the intent was, you know, I proposed this, and it was based on the idea that we've had some folks in town who've tried to pursue sort of policy ends through legal means, and that ends up costing the citizens a lot of public money defending those lawsuits. And a more, you know, appropriate way to address that is to try to persuade the policymakers to change their mind, to try to elect candidates who agree with you, to run for office yourself. But that, you know, filing lawsuits as retribution out of anger because you don't agree with the policy just results in clogging our courts even more. It results in you know, waste of public funds and waste of public resources. So that's the intent. I'm happy that we're moving forward with this. I think that you know, I'd ask Greg that as we move forward, that we do get an opportunity on a case-by-case basis to decide if it is something that we want to move forward with. But I'm happy that we're doing that.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes, Mark.
Thank you. I think your points are very well taken. I have a very similar view myself. I view this as a matter of, as you do, of directing people to engage in the political process whenever possible on political decisions. But I also think that it's important to recognize that for, in my own case, I'm going to support this. I do support this because the community does have rights to protect its resources as well. And because every dollar we spend defending ourselves against a frivolous lawsuit is a dollar we're not spending on improving a park or taking care of another problem that people would like us to take care of.
Great. If there are no further comments, Crystal, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Obert?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes. And with that, we are adjourned.